Super Mario World has a very special place in my
It's really funny to hear him say this,
childhood.
because at points in this, he kind of reveals and tells on himself that he doesn't know shit about this game.
When I tell you I was obsessed, that would be an understatement. I just could not get enough of the ROM Hacktask videos from the early 2010s, like the Pit of Death, Pit of Despair, Kaizo Mario, and basically everything else that was popular back then. But anyway, in this video, I'll be
Hopefully
going
you
over
can hear me
various
talking
collections of
over
things
this
that were either
idiot.
unused or removed in Super Mario World. Doing my initial research on this one made me realize that there really is
And once again, doing his initial research means he read the wiki page. That's all he did. He didn't do anything.
so much content that never made it into the game, and I think you might be surprised at some of the early concepts for the game that were ultimately replaced by something else. This game has unused areas, code, enemies, objects, graphics, items, sounds, and so many other things that I know that most of you guys will find interesting. Also,
Hang on,
there's
wait.
just and so many other things that I know those concepts for the game that were ultimately replaced by something else. This game has unused areas, code, enemies, objects, graphics, items, sounds, and so many other things that I know that—
Did you seriously just fucking read off the Bob in order too? Can you not even— Oh my fucking god, man. We're not even into the content itself and this guy's a fucking clown.
most of you guys will find interesting. Also, there's just no way that I can cover literally everything because of the inevitability of new discoveries and leaks that uncover even more things about this game than the massive amount of things we already have. Honestly, I don't really have anything else to say in the intro, so let's just get on with it.
You'll notice his intros are always about a minute long too. See how it's cutting off at exactly a minute? His SM64 one does that too.
For the beginnings, let's start with some general stuff. Super Mario World contains two different translucent level modes, with one for horizontal layer 1 background levels and another for horizontal layer 1 and 2. Both of the modes are fully functional, and their positions at the end of the mode list most likely meant that they were shoved into the code somewhat later into the game's development.
Notice how he keeps doing this thing where he takes a sentence and changes some words. Like, he never just directly read. Well, sometimes he does. He does that quite a lot, actually. But he'll always just kind of go in there and slightly tweak things to make them sound different.
And the levels that utilize the transparency look like this.
Now, keep in mind, you could open Lunar Magic and change the level mode. Pretty simple. I've made levels that use this before.
Donut Plains 2, there's a single Buzzy Beetle that is stuck inside of a wall. Even weirder is that this does not exist in the Game Boy Advance remake, and because the screen slowly auto-scrolls, it is impossible to be seen without using a level editor.
And like this, he slightly rearranges things so that it's not as obvious what he's doing. He's basically taking stuff, rewriting it just a little, and slapping his name.
And if you could see it, the beetle would just fall through the floor and die anyway.
I like that he added that detail.
Secret 1 that leads to this secret exit. There's warp data that takes the player to the same exit, and this was done to fix a bug with the secret exit pipe. If Mario enters the pipe while riding Yoshi, he would be just barely high enough, by a single pixel by the way, to be on the—
By the way... Oh, did he actually make something normal here? He put this together?
He would be just barely high enough, by a single pixel by the way.
Like, you could take the screenshot from Lunar Magic and not have to do a funny crop. You could even keep Lunar Magic's bounding boxes on screen so you can see why it happened to be aligned that way.
To be on the next screen up instead of the correct one. So instead of just moving the pipe down a block, they instead decided to duplicate the data for it, and that's where we get this. For some weird reason, there's another instance of the red switch map tile that's coded into Valley of Bowser. There's no way to reach—
There's such a weird way of saying this. Like, why would you say it's coded into the Valley of Bowser? I get that that's what the wiki says, but it's weird formatting. Like, you just say, for some reason, there's another red switch tile on the Valley of Bowser map.
it or activate it without hacking the game, and trying to enter this level leads to level 112, which points to the test stage. The actual level ID of the Red Switch Palace is 11B, but it doesn't actually take you there for reasons I could only imagine. Is 11B, but it doesn't actually take you there for reasons I could only imagine.
I need to grab my fucking...
Valley of Bowser 3 has its enable path on secret exit value set to left, whereas all other single exit levels have it set to up, implying that there was a path there at some point, but Nintendo probably figured that the player would have little need for red switch blocks by the time they reached a Valley of Bowser, and so they moved it to Vanilla Dome 2 instead. So the...
You notice how he does this thing that a lot of people do too, where they start everything with the word so. I do it too. I'm trying to cut myself off from doing it because... yeah.
The door on the left is how the boss door normally appears in the game, but this door on the right represents how the different 8x8 tiles stored in the VRAM comprise the boss door. Each color is a different 8x8 tile. What's weird about this though is that the graphics for the orange, purple, and green tiles are all identical, but are stored as being separate tiles.
Stored as being. What does that mean? What are you saying when you're using words, man?
This could imply that the door once had a much different appearance, and that the purple and green tiles could have been originally used for something else, like doorknobs or hinges, but again, it's impossible to know.
It's impossible, and it's not fucking impossible to know. You put a fucking doorknob here and it makes sense.
There are some blank tiles in the Overworld graphics banks which appear to be drawn over the pathways that Mario actually takes. Turns out that these tiles were once used by the developers to indicate where the unrevealed pathways were, and it's actually possible to enable this patch by downloading...
This is the one mention this guy makes of our website that is in the actual video. I actually checked the entire fucking text of this transcription, and he mentions tcrf once. Here it is. You can download the IPS file right here. That is the whole mention of this.
IPS file from the cutting room floor. At some point in time during the game's development, it was actually possible to save a Starman in the reserve item box.
And we're showing video of the bonus game. Why?
Though exactly how you would get it there is still a mystery. There's even a routine that specifically checks for the Starman item ID, which is 03, and cycles the colors appropriately.
Did he record this from his screen or something so it's not flickering at the right speed? Because, like, Chrome has this weird issue where GIFs with 0 delay don't animate properly. You can see it flickering here. Oh my god, man.
Since the values that they did input shifts each color value left by 1 bit. Changing the values to these numbers will fix it.
Wait, hang on. Say that again?
Didn't implement the palette values properly, since the values that they did input shifts each color value left by 1 bit. Changing the...
No, you got it wrong. It's wrong. You shift it by a bit to fix it. It's not that they put it in wrong.
Values to these numbers will fix it. Have you ever wondered what the bottom of the goalpost looks like?
So here's a cool thing you could do. You could open Lunar Magic and show yourself dragging the goalpost up, because Lunar Magic renders the bottom of the goalpost tiles the same way that this fucking wiki does. You could show yourself doing that. That's how you make videos about tcrf content without being a fucking clown.
Of course you have. Though they're never actually seen in-game, the goalposts actually do have a bottom tile. It's likely that they were intended to float above the ground at some point, and the rounded part of the large one was overridden at some point in development. And the only reason we even have this is because of the massive Nintendo Giga Leak that happened in 2020.
Wait, the only reason we have what?
At some point, and the rounded part of the large one was overridden at some point in development. And the only reason we even have this is because of the massive Nintendo Giga Leak that happened in 2020.
Notice that he doesn't actually show that. He doesn't show that, you know, the article links to a thing where you can see the bottom of the goalpost, which, granted, this image is probably not what I would link to here. I would link to the section with it. But you get the idea. Like, he's talking about things that make sense because there's a link on the page to say, hey, this thing that we're talking about, you can read more. But he leaves off the read more part, and it's just, hey, look. You can see the bottom of it. See, it's right here. He doesn't mention that there is an actual rounded part that you can see.
Normally, the game's bonus table caps at 1-ups after stomping 8 enemies in a row. But due to a programming oversight, This specifically doesn't apply to the wigglers. Starting from the 10th stomp, you'll receive a 2-up, 3-up, 5-up, 5 coins, 10 coins...
Hey, wait up. Okay, so he just cut this out and went straight from 3-up into the 5-up and bonuses without specifying that it's actually normal to have the 2-up and 3-up, it's just not normal to have the rest of them.
15 coins, 20 coins, and finally 25 coins.
I was gonna wonder what video he stole this from, but I'm pretty sure it's the one right next to the page.
After 25 coins, each stomp will overflow the bonus table and give a glitched bonus, which is usually a very large number of points and coins. Also, none of these unused bonuses appear right. The 5-up pulls its attributes from the code following the bonus sprite table, while the coin bonus graphics just don't exist. The only way to see them is in the SNES test program, which is what is being shown on screen.
But like, this is another place where the writing doesn't make sense. Let's do that again.
The only way to see them is in the SNES test program.
Okay, you could say, they're not present in this, but the SNES test program contains early versions of Mario World's graphics, and it still contains these tiles, which you can see here. See? If you know what the fuck you're talking about, you can actually explain things instead of sounding like a goddamn dumbass.
Which is what is being shown on screen. By extracting the graphics files from the Special World's changed enemies, the sheet contains an unmodified duplicate of the Galumba graphics, and they're actually used by the game when the Special World has been cleared. It's possible that, at one point, clearing the Special World would have made these enemies change appearance drastically, just like they did in the Game Boy Advance remake.
I would say, just like they do on the Game Boy Advance remake, but
they don't have similar sprites for the falling through parachutes graphics though, so using non-identical graphics would cause both of the designs to clash.
But like, see, that's another thing. You could make a video showing this. You could show that when they're doing their parachute animation, they look fucked up, and then when they land, they turn into the new version. You could show that. You don't have to...
Time to talk about developer tools.
Alright.
Just like with Super Mario 64, there's also developer tools for this game as well.
Shock.
I couldn't find any footage of this, nor...
My man, you can record the footage. You can do this. You motherfucker.
Do I have a Game Genie or an SNES?
I don't think I have Super Mario World extracted anywhere. Oh, but you get the idea. This is not hard to do. SNES emulator is the first thing I fucking downloaded back in the day. It's not that hard.
So instead I'm going to briefly explain them and move on.
Like you've been briefly explaining everything else. You're literally doing the same
This
thing.
Game Genie code enables a free movement in instant flight. Hold L and press A once and you'll be able to fly. Hold L and press A again and you'll be able to move Mario anywhere in the stage. Hold Y to speed up, and press L and A again to return to normal. This code enables a power-up select mode.
Oh,
Holding up
we'll
and
ignore
pressing
that.
select switches between small, big, cape, and fire Mario. Also worth noting that this was removed in the European version for some reason.
No idea why they'd remove content that's not meant for the end player. Derp, derp, derp.
This code will let you choose what kind of Yoshi you want to have on the map. Press select to cycle through the different Yoshi colors.
I really wonder what video he stole all this from, because he already mentioned, oh, I can't find any footage of it, but then appeared to show footage of it happening? Like, what?
None, yellow, blue, red, and green. Though I don't know what none would be. None, yellow, blue, red, and green. Though I don't know what none would be. These codes allow you to instantly complete any level, even ones that you haven't already beaten. Pressing start and then select completes the level via the normal route, and if you hold A and B while pressing select to complete the level, it completes it with the secret goal.
There's something else very suspicious about this video I want to commentate on real quick.
And if you hold A and
Notice
B
how it's zoomed in.
to complete the level,
Like, this isn't an artifact of how I'm playing it. This video is just extremely zoomed in to only show this part, to a degree that Mario is off-screen during it.
It completes it with the secret goal if it hasn't.
I'm starting to think that the entirety of this dude's quote-unquote research is literally just him pasting Super Mario World free move mode into Google and praying somebody else has made a video for him to steal. I don't know what color a nun-Yoshi would be, you fucking idiot.
This code allows you to reach Star World from Yoshi's house. Pressing select while on Yoshi's house teleports you straight to Star World 1.
Okay, hang on.
Pressing select while on Yoshi's house, this code allows you to reach Star World from Yoshi's house. Pressing...
Okay, so just to be clear here, this isn't the actual code he's showing, it does not translate like this. You can kind of tell that something's fucky because stuff here is not aligned to tile boundaries. This is a mosaic, like, blur-in effect that either the video he stole this from or he put in. So he's making shit up.
Select
You
while on
motherfucker.
Yoshi's house teleports you straight to Star World 1.
I have a thing with misinformation these days. Like, I've been getting on people's case because a Famicom Disk System game, Fire Rock, people speculate that it was based on a pinball engine because the other game by the author, Midnight Ball or whatever the fuck it is a pinball game. So this, you know, the next game the dude makes has really bouncy physics. The dude feels like he's slathered in grease, you know, pinball physics. But it got repeated enough that it went from being like open speculation to just being, that's how it is. Oh yeah, it's funny and bouncy because it's made on a pinball engine. You see how this translates from like random speculation to telephone 10 times to suddenly they're repeating things as fact that were just completely made up. And that's what this fucker is doing. He's taking stuff he doesn't understand, processing it through a bunch of bullshit that he still doesn't understand, and is regurgitating it onto your screen to a bunch of people who, down here by the way, fuck off, YouTube. I do not care about your recommendations. I just want to see some fucking comments. Like, there's so many people in here who are new to this stuff, who are like, wow, this is really cool and interesting. I barely knew 20% of this stuff. I didn't know about this. I hate this guy.
And finally,
the more that I watch, the more I hate this guy, because I just, like, at a top level, okay, it's a dude who's reading tcrf and putting his name on it without actually crediting where he's getting all this stuff. Like, oh, here's another thing. Couldn't find footage of this! Okay, you know what? Fuck it. Fuck you, fuck this. I'm going to actually do this. What is he doing? Overworld free movement. Is that what he's doing here? Okay, cool. I'm gonna fucking do this to show how easy it is. I gotta get myself a rum real quick, hang on. Okay, do we need any particular one? Are these for any particular version? It looks like these are probably just going to be the SNES cool. Alright, so... for Mario World 4. So we take our funny ROM. That's not the right direction. Yeah, I somehow don't have, I have limited hard drive space anymore, so I don't have entire ROM sets. They're all in the NAS, but you get the idea. Alright, so we have that. Now we need to... pull open our SNES emulator that you can download by googling SNES 9X. Wow! Hey look, it's Super Mario World, how about that? Cheat. This looks like it might be valuable for creating a video. Let's see. Copy, paste, add. Copy, paste, add. Copy, paste, add. You'd think with how good this guy was at copy pasting he'd be able to fucking do this, but apparently not. I don't have my input. Hey buddy, you can steal this footage for your next fucking video, you fucking clown. Fucking bozo. I hate this guy. That took me like 5 minutes of actual effort. Just 5 minutes. Couldn't find footage!
These codes allow you to walk on not yet revealed paths and enter not yet revealed levels.
Wait, hang on. Okay, he couldn't find footage, so he's just...
You're not allowed to go through locked doors.
He's using footage of just randomly moving around on the overworld.
Quite a lot of invisible ones. Up triggers. These triggers involve Mario touching 4 invisible points, but you're not allowed to go through locked doors. Super Mario World has quite a lot of invisible 1-up triggers. These triggers involve Mario touching 4 invisible points in a level in the correct order, and doing so will spawn a 1-up. The only way to find these are to come across them by chance, and some of them are far more obscure than others, so let's go through them all.
Okay, just cut out the part where you can find them for yourself using the level editor. Wait, is he just going to show entire fucking maps? Is that what he's doing? I'm not going to point them out, you'll have to find them.
4, Cookie Mountain.
Because he's just stealing images off the wiki again, of course. He's just going to show the maps full because he doesn't have another way of doing it. That would require doing actual work. You fucking shithead.
Donut Plains 1.
Oh.
Number 6, Wendy's Castle. Chocolate Island 2. Vanilla Fortress. Number 2, Morton's Castle. Yoshi's Island 4.
Vanilla Ghost House. Number 7, Larry's Castle.
Larry's Castle.
He actually said number 7, Larry's Castle. Oh my fucking god, man. Who says that? Who calls it number 7, Larry's Castle, for serious?
Vanilla Dome 4. Forest of Illusion 3. Gnarly. Valley of Bowser 2. And finally, the test map. So it's pretty common knowledge that if you stare down a boo for around 8 seconds, it'll briefly make a face at you.
Is it? I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was triggered for 8, like it took 8 seconds. I just thought it was random.
But something less widely known is that big boos also have a similar thing. The difference with them though is that instead of waiting 8 seconds, you have to wait 16 seconds. Alright, so now it's time to move on to the development stages.
Development stages? Or do you just mean development in general?
So before I get started with this, I want to preface this
See, there's another one, so...
section by saying that there is a lot in a straight line that if not talked about in a certain way would be potentially boring to 95% of the viewers. So what I'm going to do is talk about the sprites in chunks by increments of around 3 or so, unless the standalone sprite is interesting enough in itself. You'll see. Starting with textures from October 1989.
Textures, okay, so... Okay, he went through the development page straight to sprites. Yep, October 18, 1989. I have to zoom out a little bit because the page is too...
Some of the oldest sprites made for the game are early animations of Morton, Roy, and Ludwig, animations of the Koopalings, and an early animation of Mario riding a cloud. Morton and Roy don't actually breathe fire in the final game like these animations might suggest, but the graphics do still exist within the ROM. Same thing goes for the Koopalings. I'm gonna guess that for the Mario Cloud, it could have been used to skip levels like the Cloud in Super Mario Bros. 3, but same thing goes for the Koopalings. I'm gonna guess that for the Mario Cloud, it could have been used to skip levels like the Cloud in Super Mario Bros. 3, but it's hard to say.
It's hard to say. My man, you literally just stole words somebody else wrote and put your thought in front of it. Fuck you.
Next, we have an unknown one-tile-sized green creature climbing up a block, so let me know in the comments what his name should be.
Let me know what his name should be so I can come up with something. Oh, did he paste a picture of his cat in?
Sized green creature climbing up a block, so let me know in the comments what his name should be. Next, we have an older charge and chuck animation, originally having a graphic for being hit from the side, a dazed-looking Chuck with sparkles around him, most likely for whenever the player would jump on him, and the clapping animation might look normal, but this one has smaller hands than in the final.
He stays this one word for word and then randomly changes this one. Like, what is he even doing? Why?
Next we have a Chuck throwing a beach Koopa, which if I were to guess may have been some kind of unique...
If you were to guess...
unique attack that they would have performed when coming in contact in a stage, and we also have a turning animation.
Oh, and we also have a turning animation.
So next up we have some cannons. The first animation is a narrow tube that shoots out Koopa shells. No idea where that would have went. Looks like it belongs in an airship from Mario 3 if you ask me. We also have a small walking cannon, which along with the wind-up key, later ended up being used in Yoshi's Island 2 as an enemy called the Kaboomba.
Okay, so at least some credit where it's due. This image is not taken directly from the article that he steals it from. Like, it is not literally right next to the content he's ripping off, so he had to at least do a tiny bit of actual research.
And the Kaboomba also seemed to have been planned to be expanded upon with a larger variant that shot shells, something that would also later be implemented into another Mario game, being Super Mario Maker.
Why would you go walk around like that? It would be implemented into another Mario game, namely Mario Maker. What? Why? Just fucking say Mario Maker, it's right there.
These two sprite sheets are an early set of designs for Mario
and
Raccoon
the key.
Mario, with the differences in the first one being that Mario has a slightly smaller hat, and the interesting thing about the raccoon textures is that not only is it directly a concept from Mario 3, but it was later replaced by what would ultimately become the cape. Smaller hat, and the interesting thing about the raccoon textures is that not only is it directly a concept from Mario 3, but it was later replaced by what would ultimately become the cape.
No shit, have you played Super Mario World? Did you know that Mario has a cape in Mario World? Wow, did you know that if you run fast they still call it P-speed, based after the P-meter in Mario 3? Holy shit, man! Dude's dropping some knowledge.
It's really hard to imagine this game without the cape, by the way.
Why do you constantly say that? Like, he's always constantly imagining, oh, it's hard to imagine what it would have been. It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine. No, it isn't. Play fucking Mario 3. Boom. Now you know what it would have been like, idiot.
According to the file name for this one, these are animations that were made for an...
It's nice that he included the file name in this one. Where can I put you? Right here.
Object called the Naval Mine. They seem to be
an object called a naval mine. It's... Okay.
Attached to an early version of the midpoint, but this could also be a placeholder or just another case of overwritten graphics. This is kind of similar to the water mine that was cut from Super Mario 64 that I talked about in my other video, but it's hard to say for certain. This next set of animations are pretty weirdly separated. So I'm going to quickly go through them all instead of dragging this on. So firstly, we have an...
Weirdly separated. He's like, oh, these Mario graphics are split up into different cells because they're all different. I don't want to have to go through all of these and talk about them.
Animation of Mario flying without a cape, for some reason. Next, we have some of Mario...
Hang on. Alright, if we're doing that, I have to...
flying, but with the raccoon suit instead of the cape. One where he jolts forward, then goes back up again. And then another where he does a full-on flip. And this is probably where you thought that I'd be done talking about the cape power-up, but we've actually got 3 more early concepts for it. Interestingly, for reasons that I don't really know, the original cape texture had Mario wearing a purple helmet for some reason, with these animations being basically identical to the final ones that ended up being used. And after the helmet idea was scrapped, another potential replacement would have been Mario wearing wings, which is honestly a pretty safe option and it still does look pretty good, albeit less iconic than the cape. And the last 2 I'll talk about here is a version of the original cape with the helmet removed, which also looks pretty good on its own as well, but this is where it gets weird. This is the last and final rendition of the cape costume before it was finalized, and this version features a smaller cape, and most obviously also features Mario with a green and red outfit instead of his signature red, blue, and white, and I don't know why, it's really weird.
I should probably expand this, knowing...
Now these next ones are some of my favorites. Several completely unused Bowser cars, which were probably early concepts of the Koopa Clown car, were created at some point in April of 1990, and these are the 4 unused designs. This is by far the most interesting thing so far, at least in my opinion, and my personal favorite.
As opposed to whose opinion? The opinions of people writing the page you've been reading off of?
Favorite in order is the second one, first one, fourth one, and then the third one. But which one is your favorite? Let me know in the comments.
Let me know in the comments.
Also, I'm just now realizing this while I'm editing the video right now. But some of the frames on the first one are just gone. Like... I don't know why, they're just gone.
I don't know
this
why.
Animation, created in June of 1990, seems to most likely be a very early version of the Blarg. The animation implies that this enemy would have had its dorsal fin sticking out rather than eyes peeking out of lava like we have now. I guess there was originally going to be an animation of Bowser turning in the...
I guess there was.
Koopa Clown car, because the final game doesn't have this turning frame. The propeller is also replaced with a wind-up key, and there's also a crouching Bowser looking around without the car. Now this one is easily my favorite entity sprite so far.
He has a lot of favorites. I mean, I do too, but...
This cut elderly Yoshi with animations for walking and talking was unfortunately cut out of the game for whatever reasons Nintendo had to remove it. Based on the file name being called Dorgon House Demo, with Dragon House being the original name for Yoshi's house.
Yeah, that seems pretty obvious, like Dragon House to me, buddy. Good job picking up on the nuance there.
It definitely would have been used in Yoshi's house, probably
Definitely, he added that word.
as an NPC if I were to guess.
If you were, you guys, what the fuck, man?
Someone should make a ROM that adds the elderly Yoshi back in the game, because I would play it.
Well, he sourced this. He put the name on this one. Oh my lord. Fuck off.
The last two things in this section feature one slightly interesting thing and one really interesting thing. The snake block originally had graphics for large blocks on each end instead of all being on the same block, but that's not the had graphics for large blocks on each end instead of all being on the same block.
Instead of all being on the same block, you mean being the same size? Being the same block? Like, when you write your own things, you don't even write them well, man.
But that's not the interesting one. Animations of Mario during the castle destruction cutscene used to feature Mario traveling in and out of the background. This is really interesting to me, especially because I can't help but not think about the mini mushroom
I can't help but not think. I can help but think.
Power-up from New Super Mario Bros. Wii when I look at this. I mean, come on, it's so identical. Alright. Alright, time to move on to even more unused textures.
If I had a face cam, you'd see the, like, life draining out of my soul right now.
With all these graphics being found inside of a file called chr-stock, this first bit consists of various
You forgot the other part, man. It's not just CHR stock 2, it's CHR stock mini dragon. It's meant to talk about Yoshi, you fuck!
Animations of Mario riding an early version of Yoshi. It's also more evident that Mario is hitting Yoshi in the head in the animation where he breathes fire. Next we have this unknown creature dancing on a row of brick blocks, shaking it in the process.
Shaking what? Brick blocks?
This is yet
Okay.
another very ambiguous animation that we can only assume what it is or how it might have worked in the game. My theory is that it probably would have hid inside of the blocks and would only appear when Mario gets close to it.
Okay, so he just came up with his own wild theory there. There's nothing in here that substantiates that. Comment with what you would name it! Please give me engagement, man. I'm begging you.
Going back to the Yoshi animations, this animation of Yoshi eating a yellow shell is completely by itself, and for some reason, this animation of Yoshi eating a yellow shell is completely by itself.
It's by itself because it's a different file, you fucking bozo. Like, all of these are different files. This is its own file with its fucking test Yoshi graphics. This isn't that uncommon.
And for some reason isn't connected to the other sheet that I showed a minute ago.
You mean the one that's about Mario riding Yoshi and not Yoshi eating things?
But still. The early version of the Wiggler originally was green and had what looks like a party hat, but the hat was eventually replaced with a flower and the color was changed to yellow. So this animation has no real correlation to anything else in the game that I can find, and it's just a nameless bird flying around that ended up going unused. I'm getting large Klepto vibes, you know, the bird from Mario 64, but I have no idea. So if anybody has any good names...
I have no idea. Hey, naming this in the comments.
Suggestions for when I inevitably adopt this bird as a pet. I'd love to hear what people would name it. Oh, also, right underneath this is unused animated water.
It's like he's dragging a crop scene in OBS Town and revealing more of the...
It kind of makes it look like the bird is flying over it. Also, there's an animation of Mario swimming with a different hat for some reason. The parachuting Galumba originally had a snappier looking animation compared to the final one, and honestly I think that the final one looks worse than the early one, honestly. Next we have yet another isolated Yoshi one, but this one is specifically of a baby Yoshi eating what seems to be some kind of...
This isn't even isolated, this is part of the same file as above, he's just being an idiot.
Blue parabeetle, with both the animation and whatever Yoshi is eating not making it into the final game. I really want to eat whatever that blue thing is for some reason.
Just shut up, dude.
Early versions of the sea urchins included numbered animation frames marked in the corners, while also being different iterations of the actual enemy themselves. Frames marked in the corners, while also being different iterations of the actual enemy themselves. But before there were urchins that looked like that, this one was a very early version which more closely resembled a real sea urchin. I really like this guy. Alright, so we're done with section 2, now it's time to move on to the third. So starting off section 3, we
There's another
have very early versions of Mario and Luigi, the latter of which originally had unique graphics instead of being a palette swap of Mario. The sheet also features some Koopas, a Lakitu with a square cloud, and whatever that spiky enemy is called, I can never remember what his name is.
You know, this one? A spiny? Something that's been in pretty much every fucking Mario game? I don't know what it is. Comment in the comments if you name it something. Browser? 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 I switched zoom levels in the thing and just like froze and ate shit. This page isn't really good for reading in large font. The problem is anything that's not an equal multiple of 100 looks like shit zoomed in.
Also, just get a really good look at this sheet because it's really interesting seeing what Mario and Luigi could have looked like had Nintendo just used this one instead.
When I copy a video. Look at this guy, he's so happy. He looks like he's high on laughing gas or something. Hey kids, I can rip it off!
But to save a little bit of time, it makes more sense to talk about them all at the same time instead. Sheets are all set.
Okay, so get this.
Had Nintendo just used this one instead. These next four sheets are all separate,
but to save time, it makes more sense to talk about them all at the same time. You realize that you could just do that, right? You could put these together, you could put them all on screen at one time. You don't have to sit there and go over every single one manually, unless you're just copying off tcrf because you don't have a fucking bone of writing in your body.
That's what I'm gonna do. This first one is a row of early Mario sprites, with the difference being Mario's hat. The next one is a sheet of Mario shrinking, which was meant for the explosion scene that I mentioned earlier. Next is a sprite of Mario standing up straight, with one of them missing a hat, most likely intended to be used for the cutscene after Bowser's defeat. And finally...
Note that he omits the part that explains why it sounds like it's intended for that. He omitted that part. It's kind of important to note that it's with the other thing. Hey, Shuzo.
Shuzo_ just subscribed. Ah.
Indeed.
A scratchpad of sprite data for Luigi's distinct graphics that were implemented in Super Mario All-Stars. Also, this sheet is interesting. Wait, is Luigi Okay. Moving on. So this next group of stuff consists of an early version of the fireballs thrown by Fire Mario.
What's really funny is he says...
Early Koopa. This next group of stuff...
This next group of stuff, but it's the same group of stuff. Like, this is... it's... This is part of the Mario graphics because it's Mario's fireballs. He's throwing fireball. This is part of Mario's graphics. It's not part of the Koopa Groupa. Fucking bozo.
Consists of an early version of the fireballs thrown by Fire Mario, early Koopa Troopas that were much more reminiscent of their Super Mario Bros. 3 appearance, a sheet of the Koopa shells with their shading changing over time, climbing Koopa sprites that originally had different shading and were later given shoes, and 4 different variations of the Beach Koopas, with the differences being in the walking animation, the squashed sprite being changed from 16x16 to an 8x8 sprite that's flipped horizontally to create the other half, and the original sheet from 1989 having a biting animation, with its purpose not being known. I guess it would bite you, I don't know. Here we have an early version of the wings worn by the Paratroopers and Paragoombas that were originally red and were slightly smaller, and this can actually be seen in some very early screenshots of the game.
I'm kind of surprised that he even bothered to crop or put that in, but I guess if it links right to it, you know, no harm in cut and pasting.
Goombas are present in previous sprite sheets, but were later replaced with a new design that is also called a Goomba on the English localizations, but then was relocalized as Galoombas in later games, because Nintendo felt like doing that.
I'm just going to, like, rename this the pointless, stupid commentary bonus counter, where he just adds something stupid that wasn't in the original page, like, for some reason, maybe Nintendo did it because who knows, you know, derp. Idiot.
The sprites are reminiscent of their appearance in Super Mario Bros. 3 and are the same ones used by the Paragoombas in even more early screenshots of the game. And next we have to talk about this. This unknown creature was created in July of 1989, and my best guess here is that it was probably a 16-bit rendition of the Micro Goomba from Super Mario Bros. 3, and then just was not used in the game. Edition of the July of 1989. And my best guess here's...
See, when people talk about plagiarism, this is what they mean. This dude is laundering ideas from somebody else and claiming them as his own. The wiki says, it looks like a Micro Goomba from Mario 3. This guy says, my best guess is it's the Micro Goomba from Mario 3. Notice the subtle difference there. It's not just that you're copying content, because if you said, well, tcrf suspects that this might have been a Micro Goomba. Correct. Factual. That is exactly what tcrf writes and says. If you launder it to say, I think this, you're not actually doing anything. You're just fucking stealing shit, putting your name on it, and pretending you did it. This is the same guy who goes, oh, well, I didn't think it was that big of a problem. It's transformative content. Yeah, transforming what, you fucker?
There was probably a 16-bit rendition of the Micro Goomba from Super Mario Bros. 3, and then just was not used in the game. And while we're at it, this is another unknown creature, which later shows up in a game called Super Mario Bros. Wonder as an enemy called the Poplins, who seems to, I think, resemble a flower in its original concept, but just like with some of the other unnamed things
You think that.
so far, I don't know. So moving on.
Convergent evolution, yeah, right.
Grouping the next 4 together, the stem of the jumping piranha plant originally had less shading. A minor change in the perspective of Lakitu's head was changed, with the final time shading. A minor change in the perspective of Lakitu's head was changed. Originally had less shading. A
Minor change in the perspective of Lakitu's head was changed.
Originally had less shading. A minor change in the perspective of Lakitu's head was changed.
This is what I mean. Like, this dude, he He doesn't know what he's doing, so he runs circles around himself and does stupid shit like this. A change to this thing was changed. What does that mean? Do you have any idea how English works?
With the final tiles also including Lakitu throwing something.
Okay, so I'm going to take a guess here and say that when it says the graphics of Lakitu throwing something that didn't exist yet, it could just be that the thing that he's throwing wasn't ever meant to be in this sheet. Like, Link will be holding up his hands in a one sheet, and then the item for the sword is in a different place. And you just assume, okay, we're going to put the sword on top of that. Like, you would take a spiny egg and just drop it on front of this, and then you could animate that and bounce it all around his head and have him throw it without actually having to animate the tile. You just have a spiny egg as one sprite, his face is the other, you move him around, you don't have to mix them. That's the kind of insight that you don't get when you have a bloviating idiot talking to you and not understanding a word he's fucking reading.
The Cheep Cheeps were originally more in line with their classic appearance before being changed to what they are now.
As opposed to what?
And the classic Hammer Bros can be seen in an early version of the Forest Enemy graphics set. Early versions of the Dino Rhino
Okay, we don't count that, cool.
looked like this, and were viewed in a profile view instead of being a 3/4 view.
Oh, okay, it's all the way down.
Versions of the Dino Rhino looked like this.
Okay, so here's another thing that I just, like... Forgive me for not thinking about this earlier, but there's something else this clown could be doing here to make this video more of his own and not just, look at me, I'm reading tcrf at you. Notice how he's talking about these, right? Why isn't he showing you? Why isn't he showing you what the actual final ones look like? He's just showing you the early version. He could have gone through the trouble to pull out a Mario World sprite sheet and zoom in on the Dino Rhinos and say, look, here's the early ones, here's what the final ones look like. Compare and contrast, maybe flip between them so you can see the sprites change, you know. Neat stuff. But he's not doing that because he doesn't give a shit. He's just here to make fucking money off of shit that isn't his, and I fucking hate this man.
And were viewed in a profile view instead of being a...
The thing with this is, like, that people have pointed out, there's clearly an audience for this shit. You can go and read tcrf poorly and you'll get, 200,000 fucking views. What the fuck? Why are you here? I didn't ask for you. I was trying to highlight something, you piece of shit. Thank you. But that's what I mean. Like, these people aren't doing anything useful and they're doing an active disservice to the wiki content. I think tcrf is largely written kind of towards an audience who already knows a lot of stuff that tcrf would cover. Like, it's generally expected that you have some idea of what kind of content is on tcrf and like what a debug menu is, what a level select is, what unused code means, that sort of stuff. There's kind of a built-in assumption that you have a clue. And a lot of pages to that extent also expect you to be somewhat familiar with that. Like, if you go to the page on Mario World, you're going to read about Mario World probably because you know the game at least a good amount. And if you don't, the content, like, hopefully explains enough of it. But people who do this are doing a massive disservice to people because they show only part of it without any context, without any knowledge. It's like somebody just walking up and telling you, did you know that the Eiffel Tower is 5,000 feet tall? Okay, does that mean anything? Does that matter? Who cares? There's nothing to go, yeah, it's 5,000 feet tall, and at the time it was the tallest thing that was ever built in France, because they were too busy waving white flags or whatever. This is completely off the rails, and I'm making shit up as I go, but you get the idea. You add a context to it. You show the things that are going on. And one of the things I've wanted to do with tcrf videos is, like, we have a lot of descriptions of a debug mode. Wow, you can go here and you can push buttons, you can do this thing, it lets you warp around. But you don't actually get to see that unless you follow tcrf's instructions and load a ROM and do basically what I did earlier, where I showed, hey look, you can walk around on the overworld if you put in these game genie codes. Like, there's a lot of room for going in depth about the kind of stuff that's in here and the cool things that you can do with it. Like, oh, okay, you can go out of bounds with this. What does that look like? Well, scroll out of bounds, show stuff, see what the debug menu does. And People like this don't. They don't do anything. They don't contribute anything. They don't add anything to it. They're literally just somebody who goes there, pushes Win-M or whatever the fucking button is to turn on narrator, and sits there and reads it out to you for an hour. Without understanding any of it. What's this enemy? What do you mean it's one of the fucking classic enemies that's been in the series since it fucking began? I don't know. Comment in the comments if you know what it is, huh? It's frustrating. It's immensely frustrating.
3/4 view, and there's also a...
It's just like when the start of this video, if you remember that, 19 minutes ago, when he talks about level modes. And it's just, there's 2 level modes at the end of the list. Nintendo didn't add them for some reason. They're transparent. One of them goes into level 2. Like, that's an actual thing that I don't think he covered in that segment, was there is an actual, like, level 1 to level 2 transition in Mario World that's really fucking cool. Let me fucking demonstrate. So you have a level like this, right? And it scrolls forward automatically. Well, this level mode, at the end of the horizontal section, starts scrolling vertically. Holy shit, man! This isn't in Mario World anywhere. Like, there's special ones that scroll in various ways, but this one is specifically layer 1 down here. And then this is layer 2. If you know those cave levels where you have, like, platforms that sink into the lava, and the platforms are like that weird yellow color that stands out a lot, those are layer 2 platforms. That's why they move up and down, because they're on a different layer from the rest of the background plane, and Mario World takes extra time to handle that. It's really funny. But this was an actual thing that somebody discovered and made like a little test layout for, and I remember it because it looks really funny. It's just like the little square blocks in a staircase shape. But it was something cool. And this guy reduced it to what the wiki did, admittedly, but regurgitating. It's unused. It goes layer 1 horizontal into layer 2 vertical. Wow. I sat here and fucking doodled out something that explains the concept better than this clown did. And he had an actual tool to write this video. He went back and edited it. He went back and even commentated, wow, I'm editing this and I'm realizing I'm a stupid shithead. Oh, he didn't say that, but he should have. I'm doing this live. I'm pulling this out of my ass because I have knowledge about this game. I know what I'm talking about to some degree. I don't know everything. The Gigaleak content is pretty new to me, but I've had my fingers in Mario hacking since back in 2002 when everybody started playing around with lunar magic. I was there when some of this shit was discovered. And this guy just, he sucks. He fucking sucks.
Smaller variant of the unused rhinos as well. Another interesting one is the Banzai Bill. The finished version of the Banzai Bill is iconic, and it's hard to think of it looking any different than it does now, but the original version of it made in July of 1990 was gray, and was far more dull looking than the final. Okay, wait, let's stop for a second. What is that? It says that it's an early
Okay, so we skipped all the way down here, and Secret of Mana, I think the most that I ever touched that game was, Rachel made a hack for that, for us to play, that removed the, like, charge. Because in Secret of Mana, you have to wait, like, you attack, and then your attack bar goes and then once it hits 100, you can actually fucking punch something. If you do it before that, you do, like, 1 point of damage. Rachel removed that because I think that mechanic sucks. I get why it's there, and for some people it makes the game more fun, but I just like punching things.
blob-shaped baby Yoshi that lacks any limbs? That. It says...
It says. It. What is it? What is it? Why are you hiding this information? Why aren't you telling people that you're reading from a wiki page?
It's an early blob-shaped baby Yoshi that lacks any limbs?
But notice that he also says, it says. He's not trying to launder words that he didn't write this time. He's saying, it. Somebody else did that. Somebody else said this. Other times, he'll take words that we say and pretend he said them.
And I don't know what to say about this. It's just funny to me. Okay, but anyway, on to coins.
On to coins.
The second two coins were originally 16 by 16 sprites, which were later changed to 8 by 8 sprites that are flipped vertically to create the bottom half.
Okay, so here's another example of how you can turn this into a meaningful bit of footage. Check this out. You have the coins, right? Wowie! What if you, get this, showed the two and flipped between them, or even showed how you could take this and like... Hey, let's pull open MS Paint again because I love doing this so much, right? Like, look at this. Wow, it's a 16 by 16 and an 8 by 16. And when Nintendo wanted to make another one to save space, they just took one tile and flipped it. Look! Hang on. Yeah, that's fine, actually. I forget that you can't do this in normal MS Paint. You have to do it in, like, Paint.net. But you get the idea. You flip it and wowie! Look!
The first coin also has slightly different shading. The dragon coin went through a number of revisions until Nintendo finally settled on a coin with Yoshi's face.
Notice that he inserts that too, like he's pointing out that it took Nintendo time for this.
The dragon coin went through a number of revisions until Nintendo finally settled on a coin with Yoshi's face. They started with a generic large coin, then turned it into a coin with a 10 on it, then a 5 with a magenta color for some reason, then had Mario's face on it with a slightly different shape.
Okay, so here's a clue. The magenta color may be a palette error, man. It may just be that they goofed the color and that's what it ended up looking like, but it almost certainly wasn't going to look like that in the final game. You're just a dipshit who takes things at face value because you don't know any better.
And then finally, the coin with Yoshi's face. The smiley coin, before it had a smiley on it, originally had a star design. A similar design would later be used in Super Mario 64, and I'm glad that they went with a unique design because I think it makes Mario World stand out even more than it already does.
You realize that this wasn't based on anything before that, right? There wasn't a star coin to copy. Those didn't exist. Those came after this game. We could easily be living in a world in which the spinning red coins in Mario 64 were instead smiley face coins. Like, what? He's just grasping at straws for shit to say because he doesn't know anything. He can't talk intelligently about things, he just has to make shit up.
You guys ready for more run-ons? Alright, let's go. The super mushrooms had...
Why is it going into run-ons when it's literally just, you know, like, hello, you're just talking, man. This is the same section, you're just moving on. Ugh. This music does not deserve this.
Extra shading added to its final variant. The Fire Flower was completely redesigned late into development, mainly to stray further away from the style of Super Mario.
Mainly, he's inserting reason here. So the tcrf page doesn't try and guess why, it's just like, yeah, it was just done to stray farther, but it...
Fire Flower was completely redesigned late into development, mainly to stray further away.
But he says mainly to, assigning that was the primary reason, and not just, well, you know, they did it because it looks different. They did it primarily to make it look different.
Of Super Mario Bros. 3. The Super Leaf, also from Super Mario Bros. 3, that would have granted the player the raccoon form would ultimately be replaced by the capability, and it went through 4 different redesigns before being settled on the Leaf sprite. The question mark block was redesigned to have better shading and a less rigid design. The brick block from previous Mario games would be replaced by the rotating block. Same goes with the empty blocks, the note blocks, the wood block, and the gray block. The rubble that appears after breaking a block was changed many times.
Are we just skipping over the weird fucking eyeball block?
The gray block.
Does he just put that there and not even comment on how weird that is?
Would be replaced by the rotating block. Same goes with the empty blocks, the note blocks, the wood block, and the gray block.
Yeah, he just doesn't even comment on that. He doesn't point out how fucking weird this looks. Let's see. This game's pretty clowny.
The rubble that appears after breaking a block was changed many times. The third variant of this is also present in the SNES test.
The SNES test. It's a SNES test program that is not an optional part of the title. That's like saying it's part of Super Mario.
An early version of the bonus block originally had a picture of a 1-up on it, but
An early version originally had, as opposed to just the early version had.
was later changed to be fully green with a white star. And lastly, the triangular block originally had a mechanical appearance to it, which can be seen in pre-release pictures of the game. It would be redesigned a year later to have eyes, was eventually changed to be a hot pink color, and then was finally given a smiley. The early P-switch design has a very interesting color to it. It's hard to imagine the P-switch being anything but the shade of lighter blue that everybody knows it as. Also, the unused on and off switches at one point were red for on and green for off. The assumption here is that the switches might have functioned like the on and off blocks in the final game, but it's hard to say that too. Alright, well now it's time to move on to general stage pieces. So starting with pipes. The pipes originally had sharper edges and simpler shading, with the earliest version of them being seen in early screenshots of the game. The finalized version has rounded edges with more complex shading than the original. The spinning platform used to be taller, which resembled the way that they looked in Super Mario Bros. 3, and it also had a slightly different highlight on the top. Nintendo changed this to be thinner, which they also ended up doing with the checkerboard platform, and while I'm at it, this unknown platform also exists in the stage pieces and was scrapped from the final game. It bears a resemblance to donut blocks from games like Super Mario Bros. 3, and it probably would have made an appearance as a counterpart to the donut blocks. The door key, and even the keyhole weren't always finalized. The door used to have an extremely minor change in shading. The early version of the key had its peg on the top. The door used to have an extreme key, and even the keyhole weren't always finalized.
I love how empty of a statement that was. Did you know that the graphics in this game weren't always final? Did you know at one point they were like placeholders and work in progresses? Wow. I had no idea, man.
The door used to have an extremely minor change in shading.
Here's another case of him, like, trying to rewrite text and fucking up.
The door used to have an extremely minor change in shading.
The door used to have an extremely minor change in shading. Like, that is not a functional sentence. That is you turning your words into a pretzel.
The early version of the key had its peg on the top instead of the bottom, and the original keyhole was much larger and lacked a white outline. The white outline was most likely added so that it could be more visible in darker backgrounds, because obviously.
Because obviously! I hate this man.
Even the goal tapes weren't finalized.
Again, duh. Can you imagine having unfinished early assets?
Visible in early screenshots, the goal tapes were originally blue shifted and had a more icy blue color, and the pole on the smaller checkpoint was also much thinner than in the final version. The larger one isn't much different, with the original version also looking much more frozen. Also, the gold tape was originally flat, but was later changed to have rounded edges, much like with a lot of the textures I've already talked about. The top of the Bill Blaster was originally made up of 4 unique tiles rather than 2 tiles that are flipped horizontally to create the right half. A later version of this does still exist in the final game, but goes unused as shown on the right. This sign outside of Yoshi's house originally read Dragon rather than saying Yoshi in Japanese, which might suggest that it was once going to be called the Dragon House instead of the Yoshi House. This blanket-like object is by itself in the files, and I think mostly resembles a...
Like, most of these things are by themselves in these files, you know? It's not too surprising.
...pillow or a blanket, and because it's grouped with other stage intro...
Hang on, wait. Turn this down a little.
And I think mostly... This blanket-like object is by itself in the files, and I think mostly resembles a pillow or a blanket.
Okay, so at least he came up with the blanket idea by himself.
And because it's grouped with other stage intro graphics, it might have had a baby Yoshi resting on top of it. And now that I said that, I know everyone is going to want to see a baby Yoshi on it, so here you go. Baby Yoshi resting on top of it. And now that I said that, I know everyone is going to want to see a baby Yoshi on it, so here you go. Alright. Let's move on to Peach. Peach's early sprites originally had less shading, a slightly different tiara, and larger eyes than in the final. And there's also sprites of Princess Peach screaming, and yeah. Well, thankfully that was redrawn and was later changed to these, with the differences of the last two being in her eyelashes and the shading. Last thing about Peach is that there's also a Peach scarecrow that resembles the puppet seen during the Lemmy and Wendy fights in the final game. This scrapped Koopaling portrait is unused and was most likely going to go in one of the ghost houses, and right underneath it there's a white sign that says 6, which I'm guessing was most likely intended for the world map. Alright, let's talk about tile sets now. Which I'm guessing 6. Which I'm guessing was most likely intended for the world map.
Not plagiarism. He linked the source.
Alright, let's talk about tile sets now. This is an early version of the Plains tile set, with the most notable difference here being the white highlight on the grass, and one of the sheets having yellow grass instead of, well, green.
So here's another case, right? Some music. So this is another case where you could, in theory, take the early tile set here and paste it into the final game. Or, you know, like do a few tweaks here and there, try and line some stuff up maybe if you want to put in some actual effort. And, you know, actually show things. You could show what the difference is in game, like what it may have looked like. Who knows? Instead, Homie's just gonna show pictures from the wiki because he doesn't want to spend any effort outside of downloading YouTube.
This is an early version of the rope tile set. It's worth noting here that the mushroom platform had a more simpler design, which can be seen in early screenshots. It's worth noting here that the mushroom platform had a more simpler design, which can be seen in early screenshots of the game. The early
Pre-release screenshots always seems to turn into early screenshots of the game. Like, pre-release screenshots as a phrase, air quotes, turns into early screenshots of the game, quotes. Did he just control H?
Version of the underground tile set wasn't really changed all that much, but it is interesting that the original set was called Kanami, meaning wire mesh in English. And the last tile set, being the castle set, at some point had its slopes tiles overridden with the graphics for various different gimmicks. I hope you're ready for more entities. This is probably one of the earliest sprites of Mario, which is basically the same as the ones I showed earlier. This sheet is easily the most similar to Super Mario Bros. 3, and the raccoon power-up is clearly visible in the sheet. Along with Mario, there's also an early Koopa Troopa with a Beach Koopa standing upright, early sprites of Larry, an early Buzzy Beetle, which would eventually show up in Paper Mario Sticker Star and New Super Mario Bros. U, and a small collection of sprites that have a very different style of shading compared to everything else. Not sure if this is a result of the artist just messing around, but who knows?
Who knows?
These next two files are really interesting, and it looks like the artists were having quite a lot of fun. The sheet features Kawaso-kun, which is the river otter from a Japanese gag manga called Uchurundes, substituting as the playable character. The sheet predates the unrelated Famicom game made for Uchurundes by about a year and a half, and if you haven't noticed by now...
Wait, did he stole that comment too?
These next two files are really interesting, and it looks like the artists were having quite a lot of fun.
Even the fucking observations he makes are laundered. I mean, he's been doing this the whole fucking time, but, you know, imagine if I was trying to keep count of laundered opinions. I'd have run out of space on this thing already.
The sheet features Kawaso-kun, which is the river otter from a Japanese gag manga called Uchurundes, substituting as the playable character. The sheet predates the unrelated Famicom game made for Uchurundes by about a year and a half, and if you haven't noticed by now, this has various enemies that straight up aren't in the game. This edition was also found with a comment in a file called zel_play.asm reading Metar Gauge Sub by Kawasu, which might mean that Kawasu in this context could just be a nickname for one of the devs. Like with Mario...
But who knows, right, am I, guys?
This is probably the earliest version of Yoshi, which initially took on a very lanky and primitive appearance as opposed to what he looks like now. It's based on an early concept sketch that Shigeru Miyamoto drew during the development of Super Mario Bros. 3. Along with Yoshi, the remaining sprites consist of an unknown crocodile like Koopa, maybe intended to be a new dinosaur-themed subspecies of Koopas, a scratch pad of graphics for the bipedal Koopa Troopa, early Beach Koopas, including an early sprite of a Beach Koopa being ejected from its shell, a small Hammer Bro, which doesn't appear in the game at all, what appears to be a turning sprite for Spike Tops, similar to the one Koopas have, another early dinosaur-like iteration of Yoshi, early sprites of Red Hat Brim Mario riding Yoshi, with early versions of Balloon Mario too. This sprite sheet features things I've already talked about, except for this thing.
This thing? What is this thing? I have no idea. I'm obsessed with Mario World, but I have no idea what a nipper plant is.
Numerous sprites of Mario with a red hat brim again, including the fireball throwing frame, raccoon ear tiles, and a few early small Marios. Early versions of the Dry Bones, which are really similar to their Super Mario Bros. 3 counterpart. Early versions of the Goomba. An early lava bubble with non-transparent eyes and different shading. Early versions of the Skull Raft. A few different iterations of the Pea Balloon. A big piranha plant, similar to the one seen in Mario Kart 64. And finally...
Oh, he's literally just like tossing these on rotated too. That's great.
A big piranha plant, similar to the one seen in Mario Kart 64. And finally, this appears to be a scratch pad of the spheres that are attached to the spinning platform, but with a mushroom appearance instead. Did I say finally? I'm not done yet.
My brother in Christ, you wrote the script. Oh wait, no you didn't, you stole it!
but with a mushroom appearance. This appears to be a scratch pad of the spheres that are attached to the spinning platform, but with a mushroom appearance instead. Did I say finally? I'm not done yet. Remember this guy? The mushroom
What does
appearance
that say?
instead. Did I say finally? I'm not done yet.
Hey, you want some more? Some more what? No, you want more of nothing? You're killing me, Smalls.
Remember this guy? Well, he's back, and he's featured in another file, being this one. An early version of the animated candles seen in one of the castle backgrounds is being yet. Remember this guy? Well, he's back, and he's featured in another file, being this one.
He's featured in another file, being this one. He doesn't mention what file it is, he just says that. He just says, yep, he's in another file. Which one? I ain't gonna say anything.
An early version of the animated candles seen in one of the castle backgrounds is here too, and in the final game, the flame and light used separate graphics with different animations, but the original ones were all in the same file. This pretty much confirms the thing that Baby Yoshi was eating earlier is a parabeetle, because...
Yep, I got my windows backwards. Shit, I hit the fucking button. God damn it. I don't want to have to scroll through all this shit again.
Use separate graphics with different animations, but the original ones were all in the same file. This pretty much confirms the thing that Baby Yoshi was eating earlier is a parabeetle, because these sprites for a parabeetle, an enemy from Super...
There's that, you just taking that as like out of context. Saying, oh, this exists so clearly, that's what the other thing is, right?
3 can also be found unused. The shimmering animation for the brick block, and what seems to be an early version of the grab block, both of which resemble, guess what? Their Super Mario Bros. 3 counterpart.
If what? Guess what? It's stolen!
The brick block would be replaced by the rotating block, with the grab block using the same graphics as the new rotating block, but with its respective color. Next is a scratch pad of what seems to be an early version of the fireball that Yoshi spits. Early versions of Rib Van Fish, early dolphins, and a giant fish that resembles the boss bass from Mario 3.
Surprised he didn't go, hey, guess what else that's from? It's Mario 3 again!
Sprites of a Sledge Bro, which is another Mario 3 enemy that...
Oh, there he did it! Good job, boy. I knew you could do it. Proud of you.
Here in Mario World. A sheet of early dolphins and some kind of shark is present in this one, with the sharks being obviously scrapped, but then later introduced in Super Mario Land 2. There's also a similarly designed character named Guppy. Sorry, not that one. There we go.
I hate this man.
Guppy would later appear in Super Mario Galaxy as well. Okay, I swear we're almost done, just hang in there.
Looks at video runtime.
Animated tiles for the early question mark block and the brick block can be found, as well as some patches. Later renditions of the unused Venus fire trap and the upright piranha plant are here too. More early renditions of Yoshi with a rather large snout in this one. Slightly different sprites of Yoshi compared to the final, with the differences that I've noticed being in the scales on the back of its head.
He actually, like, did something vaguely unique and commented on something that's not pointed out in the wiki text. I'm surprised.
A collection of 3 files of early Mario looking up, crouching in 2 different ways, and Mario's head...
These aren't different files, they're part of the same.
...in a profile view. Right underneath this is also a gray wind key for something.
I think we missed a few. Good with adding more.
A tiny Yoshi that's completely by itself in the files, which looks a lot like the unused No Yoshi sign.
He's not even going to show the No Yoshi sign, is he? This is a perfect opportunity to drop that in here.
Early Super...
Nope. It's the perfect place to put the No Yoshi sign, because look, it's this. It looks like that. Is he going to do it? No. Does tcrf do it? Also no, but we probably should.
Koopa sprites with a smaller, less detailed cape, an early, smaller diagonal pipe, which is far more reminiscent of normal pipes, and the last one I'm going to talk about are these early versions of berries. A variant of the round berry still exists in the final game as a placeholder, but it's overridden with the final animated frames at runtime. There's a couple other things here that I kind of glimpsed over because this is going on for far too long now. So the last thing I'll highlight here is the very large dinosaur that were probably early blogs. The non-bone throwing dry bones is pretty interesting too, but other than that, the unused files here are either duplicates.
He even had to just copy that too. The non-bone throwing dry bones.
Bones is pretty interesting too, but other than that, the unused files here are either duplicates or they're just not really worth discussing. We have one more section to go over in the development chapter, and that would be for all of the background graphics and tile maps. So let's start with the overworld. From the earliest leaked files, Super Mario World originally had plans to have a much different overworld than what it ended up being in the end. These map graphics from April and June of 1989 are the earliest map tiles used for marking levels, land, and Mario's starting position. Very similar to Mario 3. The earliest known versions of the overworld maps themselves were found from multiple data leaks and consist of mock-ups of very early versions of the world. These maps are purely graphical and don't contain any level data, and it appears that Map C was left unfinished by the devs since it's filled to the brim with Mario tiles. Map C looks very similar to Map B in that it was the shape of a mushroom with a winding path that Mario would traverse from the bottom up. There's also a Map A file that isn't shown here, but that one is pretty much identical to map.scr, with the exception being corrupted ocean tiles on the top and bottom of the map. These four maps are referred to as the Mode 7 overworld, with Mode 7 being a reference.
Nobody calls them that, it's just...
These four maps are referred to as the Mode 7 overworld, with Mode 7 being a reference to the SNES background Mode 7, which allowed for stretches and rotations to be performed to one background layer. This means that the devs might have originally intended for the overworld to be zoomed in and out, or perspective to be applied on it, kind of like how it does in The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Because of Mode 7's limitation of having only one background layer, the overworld panels and paths are on the same layer as the actual terrain itself. The map in the final game uses Mode 1, with most of the terrain on Layer 2, while paths and level tiles are placed on Layer 1. But as for the actual maps themselves, the devs experimented with multiple ways of laying out the pathways. The first version, Map Mode 7, had two pathways from the pipe near the bottom left on the main island, with one that seems to have a dead end, and with the other one leading to a pipe up to Bowser's castle at the north of the island. The second map, Map Mode 7B, is almost the same overworld as the first, but this one has more parts of the map being raised, obviously, and a new singular pathway exists around the world. The third map, Map Mode 7A, has the exact same shape as the second, but the obvious difference is that with each numerically defined...
Why does he say every difference has to be, quote, obvious? Like, that's another one of his stupid little ticks. It ticks me off.
A has the exact same shape as...
Like, this is obviously plagiarism, dipshit, get fucked.
Second, but the obvious difference is that with each numerically defined tile, there is a branching pathway with 3 alphabetically labeled tiles. The fourth and last one, map rom.scr, is just a blank version of the last two. Judging by the file name alone, and the fact that 4 rows of tiles along the bottom match with the bottom 4 rows of tiles in the Mode 7 overworlds, 2 tile maps called Chizu 2 and Map Unit 1 contain overworld data that was made at some point in between the Mode 7 maps. Unfortunately, the graphics aren't included when the files leaked, and any existing map graphics don't really render right. This unassembled reconstruction gives us an idea of what the map might have looked like, and it turns out that this map was simply made to just test the tile set, so... Various early...
See, this is something that this idiot said too, but I'm not sure, like, how do they substantiate? this claim? How do they decide that this was probably just made to test the tile set and nothing else? Like, that reads as a completely unfounded assumption to me. Also, hello, floating here.
Really, tile maps in the game exist?
Anyway, now, I'm, I ran into this dude's videos like a month ago. The Super Mario World one in particular hit my recommendations feed. And, I tried to ignore it, because I had a feeling it was going to be one of these fucking things. Where idiot reads tcrf article poorly. I was right. I watched originally the first, I want to say, minute 30 to 2 minutes, which is about where he goes from the level types to the, like, beetle placed off the edge of the screen. And I looked at the tcrf page, and it was the exact same. Like, same order, basically the same text. I'm like, oh boy. Idiot. Somebody who does this. I kind of buried it. And then I saw it come up again, and then I saw the Mario 64 one, and I looked at that one, and the Mario 64 one is the exact same as this. It's man reads tcrf page poorly, gets things wrong, and otherwise is an idiot. Like, did you know that their monkey in the Mario 64 is Ukiki? I don't know how to pronounce it properly, I may have even gotten it wrong, but that's something the game tells you that. It tells you that when you're in the mountain stage because he's in a cage. He tells you all that shit. Just like Mario 64 has bats, they're in Hazy Maze Cave, which is one of the levels you are probably going to play in that game. And he's like, oh, did you know this game has bats? Like, my brother in Christ, you're making a video about this game's cut content and you don't know the basics of it? It's just that shit. It's infuriatingly stupid.
With the general shape of a mushroom. With differing sets of unknown graphics, the file kanoko.scr contains the earliest
Wait, hang on.
mushroom-shaped map.
We took a break for a bit there, but he just spliced a sentence in a really stupid way. Let's go back to the tape. A little bit earlier.
Turns out that this map was simply made to just test the tile set, so... Various early tile maps in the game exist with the general shape of a mushroom. With differing sets of unknown graphics, the file kanoko.scr contains the earliest mushroom-shaped map that there is.
He turned this into one sentence. Like, he split it here and turned this into one sentence where he just kind of... It completely changes it. The first one is, there's different mushroom tile or mushroom overworlds with different, like, sets of graphics, but nothing really matches anything. And this particular file contains what appears to be the earliest one, and he turned it into a fucking mess.
Created in July of 1989, it's likely that at least one of the tile maps uses the graphics from the 1989 build of the game. Using the map graphics from a file called xipmaster.cgx as a base, it's possible to rearrange the tiles to complement what the SCR files are expected.
Note that it's not one can, it's that it's possible, because this fuck sure as hell isn't doing it.
To define. Most of the tiles are clean matches, but some had to be improvised to fit the SCR layout. Apparently some cliff sides had to be manually mirrored, and other improvisations were the creation of specific grass, cliff, and water tiles.
Notice he also does it here too. Apparently some cliff sides, no, it specifically says that is what had to be done.
Other improvisations were the creation of specific grass, cliff, and water tiles. But this is what it looks like. There also appears to be early waterfall animation tiles in a file called vram-kappa-bigblock.cgx. This mockup screen shows what the waterfall probably would have looked like. Included in the aforementioned files are these three graphics as well, which include overworld tiles, improvised tiles, and the textures for the waterfall itself. The file mapbg2new.scr expands the mushroom overworld by moving the mushroom island itself to the bottom left and adding an additional island that leads to a larger mainland. This new overworld design was later expanded on with 4 more tile assets with paths and various pieces of decoration. Design was later expanded on with 4 more tile assets with paths and various pieces.
Tile assets are not tile sets, my friend.
Pieces of decoration. From the various states of completion on these maps, I'm gonna guess here and say that the first 2 maps, specifically the second one, was intended to be the original overworld before any levels were completed, and that the map would be completed and ready to go when all of the event tiles were revealed. From the various states of completion on these maps, I'm gonna guess here and say that the first 2 maps, specifically the second one, was intended to be the original overworld before any levels were completed, and that the map would be completed and ready to go when all of the event tiles were revealed. It might be hard to believe, but map BGT chica.scr is a variation of the Mushroom Overworld and is notable for having the word test written at the top of the map. The bottom of the map still being visible makes it clear that this map was placed right on top of the Mushroom Overworld file, and the name of the file itself suggests that it might have been an early test for Vanilla Dome or another background submap, as chica is Japanese for the word underground. Layer 1 data for the overworld handles information regarding level pathways, tiles, pipes, and some additional decorations. Level tiles from the graphics files called VRAM map kappa shima.cgx and level path graphics from VRAM map.cgx can be combined in order to create a useful tile map to look at old layer 1 data used for the mushroom map designs. The oldest tile map that there is directly applicable to the mushroom map designs. The oldest tile map that there is directly applicable to the very first Mushroom Overworld, and when it's laid over the 1989 screenshots, it's very clear that it was made for it.
It's good that you have this all nice and zoomed in. So, don't talk about the person who actually did this mock-up or anything. This guy, just, you know... You made this? I made this.
2 more sets of Layer 1 title maps also correspond to the 2 versions of the completed overworld from earlier. This data can actually be overlaid on top of the maps themselves to get additional details about decorations and how Mario would traverse the map. It's worth noting here that at this current time in development, castles did not yet exist in the game, and
sometimes I think he's having an original thought, and it's just because I haven't scrolled down far enough to see where he's stealing it from.
Noting here that at this current time in development, castles did not yet exist in the game, and the castle design graphics were instead used to
Castle design graphics. He actually... Hang on.
And castles did not yet exist in the game, and the castle design graphics were instead used to house graphics for other pieces of Layer 1, like horizontal bridges, tree decorations, cave entrance tiles, and the tower from Super Mario Bros. 3.
Yeah, I think when the wiki is talking about castles, air quotes, like I'm doing air quotes IRL, you can't see it because I don't have a camera. But castle in this context, I think, is referring specifically to the like double-story tower castles that Mario goes into that are scattered on the overworld and numbered where all the Koopalings are. It looks like here it's just the quote-unquote fortresses from Mario 3. So it's like saying that Mario 3's castles at the end of the world didn't exist yet, basically. Same deal.
The last Layer 1 tile map data is actually for the test map. There's actually an interesting connection to the main map here, and it's that the cave entrances on the main map appear to overlap exactly with the cave entrances in the test overworld. The test world might have been intended to be an underworld that links up the caves on the map, or it was just a map to test warps that just so happened to line up here. Coincidence? Yeah, probably. Warps that just so happen to line up here. Coincidence? Yeah, probably.
You're killing me, Smalls.
The files maptable.scr and mappanel.scr lay out 12 by 12 sections of layer 2 tiles that are laid out on the map as part of events that trigger upon the completion of a level. These two in particular correspond with the older set of Mushroom World graphics which we only know about through the leaks. Also, since I didn't really explain it yet, layer 2 is used to place the main terrain pieces of the Overworld. Since I didn't really explain it yet, layer 2 is used to place the main terrain pieces of the Overworld map on, and layer 3 is used for the Overworld border and the status bar.
Another case of I was wondering where he was ripping off from, and it turns out it was just later because he's skipping shit.
Maptable6.scr lays out larger event tiles for the known graphics variant of the Mushroom Overworld, probably used to give a link in certain places between the Overworld in its undetailed state to the version with all of its paths.
No, he jumps back and forth, because why
This
not,
file,
right?
called xmapbg3, is an outlier of a map file that's meant to bridge the gap between the Mushroom Overworld and the Overworld in the finished game. And nobody knows what this is specifically for, so if anybody does, let me know.
Comment below if you think you have figured it out, bud. What's interesting about this, and is something that the article doesn't actually talk about, is there's clearly a pattern to these squares. As you go this way, the number of hills on the left side go up, and same as you go up. As you go higher up, you get more of the little hills, and then eventually it changes into big hills, which seems kind of interesting. You know, that looks interesting to me, that there's clearly some kind of numbering system going on here, but that's not really implemented anywhere here.
This map
It reminds me, honestly, of Kirby's Adventure on the NES, the warp room that has the binary symbols over the world warps.
file, which is honestly a mouthful, so you can just read.
Man, all you have to do in this video is fucking talk. You didn't do a single original thing, and you're like, oh, that's too hard to read. Somebody else can do it. This research stuff is really hard, man.
This map file, which is honestly a mouthful, so you can just read it, holds early layer 1 data for the submap, which is the section of the overworld that contains Yoshi's Island, Valley of Bowser, Vanilla Dome, Special World, Forest of Illusion, and Star World. The only data that exists here is for Yoshi's Island, Valley of Bowser, and Vanilla Dome, and graphics for a locked key entrance and a much larger Bowser's Castle also exist in the title map data, but because of how out of place it is, it's assumed that this file was a test. A similar tile map file contains only Bowser's Castle, and the bottom 4 tiles of layer 1 data only show 2 paths from Forest of Illusion. The castle in this file uses palette and tile data that still remains in the final game as well. This tile map has 2 copies of the paths in Star World because obviously, with one in the top left and one in the final position in the bottom right. It's important to note here that the Star Warps don't actually use star tiles, but use regular level tiles just
It's
like
important
the
to
normal
note.
levels in the stage. The original tiles aren't even the same, with the paths in this version using tiles that enter at a 45-degree angle from the side for some reason.
For some reason. I think we missed another few.
The path actually breaks if you implement it into the final game. so the devs decided to use a different niche tile for the stage.
I'm surprised that he's actually blinking back and forth. Like, he had to have stolen this GIF from somewhere, right? There's no way he actually did work.
The files XMap BG1 and BG1 Chica correspond to the layer 1 data.
But like, even this looks weird. Bowser's castle is just pasted on top here.
Of the main and submap respectively. There doesn't seem to be any differences with this version and the final version, and the dates for the files come after the game's release in Japan. XMap BG2 Chica, which is the one on screen, corresponds to the layer 1 data of the maps, and Chica 2 has some of the edges of each world map covered by solid tiles, which is obviously not how it looks in the final game.
Obviously. Duh.
Map Table 6A and Map Table 2 contain the 12x12 and 2x2 Layer 2 event tiles that correspond to the final version of the game. These next files are some of my personal favorites and are called final version of the game. These next files are some of my personal favorites and are called map tables. These two files lay out 16x16 layer 1 tiles, including path tiles, level tiles, warp tiles, and other decorative tiles on layer 1. The graphics included in the files include collections of graphics, like for example the signs that go all the way to 7 in the image on the left. And if you had to ask me which one my favorite was, I don't think I could give you an answer, honestly.
Because he didn't do any of this, he's just reading it off, he doesn't care, he doesn't have a favorite. Why should he? He's reading this because it gets him ads.
So the next point.
Like, I think if I had to look at this, I'd say that cactus is pretty cute. Look at that little guy. I could see that being like a tcrf fave icon. That's my favorite graphic. Or like the Goofy 6 here, that's pretty funny. Boing! You can see a bit of it up here too, they left a chunk. But look at that! This guy can't even be bothered to pick a favorite. He's like, I don't know, I don't give a shit, I'm just reading this because it gets me ads.
Portion I'm going to talk about are the status bars and the titles.
Oh, the next part you're going to talk about, the one that's right under all the other shit you've been doing.
Various different tile map and graphics files contain layouts for the status bar, map overlay, and title screens that ended up being unused. The oldest file from October of 1989 includes a very early Mario start screen, and there's quite a lot of differences here. First off, the Mario Start text uses the traditional 1x1 font rather than the taller font on the final screen. It also says the current world and level number, and for some reason the text has 2 exclamation points instead of 1.
That's another thing he likes doing. So, see what happened here.
World and level number, and for some
it includes the level number for some reason, and then it also has 2 exclamation points. How bizarre!
Reason the text has 2 exclamation points instead of 1. Really the most obvious differences here.
If you want to know what I think the reason for 2 exclamation points is, it's because either they wanted, like they may have wanted it to be nice and centered with the MA and the 2 exclamation points, it makes the text balanced. If they didn't do that and they wanted to keep the same format, they'd either have to put a space here and it'd be like Mario Start exclamation point. Or put 2 spaces between Mario and Start, which would make it look weird next to the single space and world number. It's not that hard, you just kind of come up with an interesting reason.
Aside from the color being changed to black, is that it features the status bar as well as the item box, which is very similar to, you guessed it!
My man thinks that he's on like a hyper conspiracy here. Did you know that Mario 3 kind of resembles Mario World? Did you know that in development they made Mario World and it was a lot like Mario 3 at the time? Did you know? That's a big C. Did you know? Did you know that, man?
Here's the status bar as well as the item box, which is very similar to, you guessed it, Super Mario Bros. 3.
It's actually a lot more reminiscent of Mario 1. Like, don't get me wrong, Mario 3 kinda has the same thing going for it, but the time being spelled out and underneath, the coin count being like here, the score and the time are in separate places, but I don't know, I don't think I could say this is clearly Mario 3.
This file, which includes layer 3 background graphics for castle levels, also happens to include 2 older copies of the status bar. This version of the HUD is far more complete than the last one, and this version uses the stylized Mario text with the time and coin counter having swapped places as well for whatever reason. This tile map, called 2bitmater.scr, shows a version of the status bar that is almost the same as the final, but like with beta screenshots of the game itself, the lives counter is not centered under the player name, the time counter itself is white instead of yellow, and the coins and bonus points counter is 1 tile closer to their respective values than in the final. The coins and bonus points counter is 1 tile closer to their respective values.
Perspective values.
Than in the final. This early tile map of the
I'm surprised you didn't mention the funny tiles underneath the lives counter, because that looks kind of weird.
Title screen features 2 panels that are dated July of 1989. The left panel, which for some reason contains tile map data that when
I like that he actually took the opportunity to like downplay the usual tcrf or the usual rhetoric he's been going. For some weird reason, and this one he's just like, for some reason. The tcrf one is actually more bombastic.
Deciphered from a different file shows the boss platform for Iggy and Larry, and the right panel is supposed to be the title graphic when deciphered. Title.scr advances on the previous one using 4 panels. The first 2 panels are basically the same, but this time the second one properly uses the graphics for the title screen. The third panel, based on its pattern, shows that it's actually the zoom out of the Mushroom Island from a 1989 build screenshot of the game, and it's worth noting that there's actually no graphic for this in the leak, which means that someone had to manually reconstruct it, so shout out to whoever did it.
This is something that came up in the staff channel, right? This is one of the things this clown does.
Leak, which means that someone had to manually reconstruct it, so shout out to whoever did it.
My man, here's how you do research. Check this out. Hey, it's that image you're talking about. I wonder who made it. Looks like I reconstructed this. Uploaded by Bushy from Project Kanoko Island. That's who did it. That's how you find out. That's how you do the most basic fucking level of research humanly possible to not sound like you are just bloviating out of your fucking asshole. And this guy couldn't do it.
Reconstructed, so shout out to whoever did it.
Credit to the original artist. Fuck you. Fuck this guy. I'm pretty sure this wasn't an easy task either, because you're working with this. You're working with this shit right here. This is what you have to deal with. And you have to come up and find the proper tiles, and otherwise draw ones that don't fit, to get something that kind of resembles what it's supposed to. And homie here just copied it, pasted it, and went, shoutouts to the author, thanks guys, I'm gonna profit off of this. This is what I mean. Like, to go back to an earlier point, yeah, he put tcrf in the top of the link now. Notice that it's not the article page he's ripping off, it's just the website, because otherwise you might find out that he's just copying shit from the wiki wholesale. But then you go down here, and below all this shit, and by the way, support me on Patreon! Give me your money! Give me your money so I can record more shit other people did. Here's the thing that he did for credits. You might notice that the links on all these, all go to just the profile pages. Not to the actual videos. The homie just took random shit. Hey look, remember that guy, the one that we were just talking about? The Bushy from Project Kanoko Island? Hey look, Kanoko Island 89. I wonder if that's related. Yeah, it is, because he just fucking stole these people's footage too. This guy fucking sucks. Anyway, yeah, you ready for some more content? Bastard.
Title new.scr improves a...
That's the thing that gets me when people say like, oh, you're plagiarizing from tcrf. No, you're not just plagiarizing from tcrf. You're plagiarizing from every single one of these fucking people that you stole content from. tcrf is just the largest one, and it's the one that's most likely to notice that you fucking stole everything because, wowie, you didn't bother to do the thing that you spent 70 minutes bloviating about. But, like, if we didn't know this, who's ever gonna fucking look that up? Who would know that they were the ones responsible for recreating this and that he just stole random videos from these people to throw in his own content? Like, people will say, oh, you ripped off tcrf and stuff. It's everyone. And 9 times out of 10, the other people that got ripped off aren't going to see anything from it.
The last one yet again, with this one using the finalized color scheme, as well as having the copyright symbol now having its own distinct palette from the other text. 2-bit tile new is very close to the final game, but the trademark symbol still isn't fixed. Also, for some reason the selection cursor is green in the middle 2 screens because the devs felt like it, I don't know.
Shut the fuck up. I fucking hate this guy.
2-bit tile new NES is the United States version of the title frames, and these ones have even more...
The title frames. He left out title screen frames, so it's just title frames. No, it's a frame around the title screen. That's what it fucking is.
...unused information than in the others. So firstly, in the second and fourth images, you can clearly see text that says Super Mario Bros. 4. Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, really interesting. Did you know that this game was called Super Mario Bros. 4 Super Mario World in Japanese? It's on the title screen.
The second set uses the Japanese version of the logo but the American trademark symbol. The third set has the Japanese logo but a weird thin trademark logo. And the fourth one seems to be some kind of zone select screen. These tiles...
The funny thing is, like, the zone select screen I'm pretty sure is actually covered elsewhere, and I want to say it may or may not be related to the Nintendo Super System, the thing that, like, you put in credits and you got to play the game for 5 minutes or whatever. Don't quote me on that, because unlike this clown, I'm not trying to speak authoritatively, I'm just pretty sure I kind of remember this, but I'm not sure.
Maps found in the file 2-bit map back shows 4 different situations that the player might encounter. The status bar on the top is consistent with the early 1989 builds, and since I can't read Japanese, I'm not really too sure what the second and last one say. It's worth noting here that I'm not really too sure what the second and last ones say.
I'm going to take a guess because while I don't know Japanese either, I'm pretty sure this is just gibberish garbage text based on the fact that everything seems to be nonsense here. Like, I'm pretty sure that says Mario. Mario. Like, if you're gonna do a shit about unused games, you should probably at the very least learn what the word Mario is. Mario. But again, you don't fucking care, you just want ad money.
The layout of the lives transfer screen is different to that of the final game, and in the final version, the life counter is displayed next to where the sprite for Mario and Luigi are, with their names displayed right below the sprites. The last image also appears to be a file deletion menu that would have been accessible from the Overworld. This updated set of menus, being updated 4 months later by the way, looks much closer to the final. The file select screen is apparently no longer present from the Overworld, and the first panel now shows everything but the sprites for Mario and Luigi. The save prompt in the second image is now down to 2 options instead of 3, and the third panel now has the continue and quit buttons from the game over screen. 2-bit map NES is the international translation versions of the panels we just looked at, but for some reason some of them have the old status bar. Also, notice how the second panel says continue with no save. This is more or less meant to say continue without save, but that's a very minor gripe to the translations.
My man, you've been making so many fucking misstatements, you have no room to complain about the translation goop.
Alright, moving on to foreground tile sets. Yanesaka, which roughly translates to roof slope, is one of the first tile maps which is dated October 1989, and this is the first tile map devoted to an actual foreground theme. It looks really similar to the current mushroom platform tile set, but this version is orange and is actually very different in the design of the platform and backgrounds themselves. This one, chica-back.scr, lays out a couple of underground pieces. Not really anything super special in this one. This one lays out various sizes for the crates in the sunken ghost ship, the launcher for the torpedoes, and the foreground seaweed object that goes unused in the final game. This tile map is responsible for laying out tiles used in the mushroom tile set, including stacked mushroom platforms, the moving rope conveyor belts, and various line guide configs.
Why does he say it like that? Various line guide configs.
The moving rope conveyor belts, and various line guide configs. This one lays out the tiles for the large plants seen in levels like Vanilla Dome 4 and Groovy. Also, for some reason the example plant in this image uses an incorrect dark yellow palette instead of the obvious yellow that it's meant to be. Levels like Vanilla Dome 4 and Groovy. Also, for some reason the example plant in this image uses an incorrect dark yellow palette instead of the obvious yellow that it's meant to be.
Like, the way he says it there, it makes it sound like this is an error in the image itself. Like, the image itself has the error and not... This guy sucks.
This tile map lays out the graphics for the tapestry seen in door 3 of Bowser's Castle. There's not really that much relation though between this layout and the one in the final game. I'm gonna go pretty fast on these next couple ones, so I hope you're paying attention.
I'm going to get up and take a break. I gotta stretch. I've been streaming for almost 2 hours, over 2 hours now, so I'm gonna go ahead and do myself a favor. You guys can watch this clown.
The Dokkan unit file contains 16 by 16
I'm just gonna put it on auto
put
scroll
them together to create the diagonal pipe that I've already mentioned, as well as the old bush textures with other decorations and 2 layouts. The large and small bushes using the graphics set in the final game, the graphics for the layer 2 crusher objects, more 16 by 16 background tiles, as well as foreground bushes and other multi-block decoration. This file, which is literally 2 objects. This map shows foreground blocks and components, such as brick blocks, note blocks, midway points, and gold tapes. This tile map lays out the individual tiles for the underground asset, with sample slopes and other platforms displayed on the right. There's also this one, and 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 okay, I think you get the idea. So when I was originally going into this video, I knew that there would be a lot of things that ended up going unused in this game, but my god, it's so much more than I thought. From all the individual tile maps, backgrounds, graphics, and whatever else, this video would literally be an hour longer if I didn't just quickly sum up the rest of these. The sheets that I'm going to scroll past right now are still interesting in their own right, but there's like 1,000 of them. And aside from the cutscene graphics for things like the background scenes for the opening cutscenes, the scenes for the
I'm back. I wasn't going fast enough. Hang on. I gotta speed up for this guy.
Baseball graphics. Everything else in this section is just really dull on camera if I covered the rest. So we're gonna move on. I know this is gonna disappoint somebody out there, but there's a...
I find it incredible that, like, hang on. Like, he's gonna skip over fucking baseball?
The scenes for the last Bowser fight, and baseball graphics. Everything else in this section is just really dull on camera if I covered the rest, so we're gonna move on.
Yeah, he's literally just scrolling the wiki page for once. It's pretty...
It looks really similar to the current mushroom pipe that tile blocks and forms just one. And I knew that there would be a lot of things that ended up going unused in this game, but my god, it's whatever else more than I thought. From all the...
Hey, I recognize that website. Can you give me the name of it, please? What's really funny is because he's not scrolling the actual parts that he's been blabbing about, for once he's showing the page that he's reading off of, he's just not reading it.
Graphics and whatever else. This video would literally be an hour longer if I didn't just quickly sum up the rest of these. For individual in this more than I thought. From all the individual tile maps, backgrounds, graphics, and whatever else, this video would literally be an hour longer if I didn't just quickly sum up the rest of these. The sheets that I'm going to scroll past right now are still interesting in their own right, but there's like 1,000 of them. And aside from the cutscene graphics for things like the background scenes for the opening cutscenes, the scenes for the last Bowser fight, and baseball graphics, everything else in this section is just really dull on camera if I covered the rest, so we're going to move on. I know this is going to disappoint somebody out there, but there's 1,000 of these tile maps. I promise that the rest of the sections talked about here are going to be far shorter than this one,
so also consider here, right? He says, "I'm sorry I'm going to disappoint you.
Somebody out there, but there's 1,000 of these.
I just can't do it. There's so much." But he doesn't tell you where you can go read about the ones that he just blew past. Because again, he's not actually interested in sharing the unused content. He's just here to get eyeballs. If you cared, you would say, "Hey, here's where I got all this stuff from. Here's where you can look at it in ways that aren't me, you know, smacking it on screen in 1080p quality blown up." But he doesn't do that. He's just, it doesn't matter, you don't care. You don't need to know. I said I'm going to show you all this stuff, somebody else can do it. Maybe I'll make another video. Get more views.
In December of 2022,
prototype build of the game.
A US localization prototype for Super Mario World was leaked online by somebody named Forest of Illusion.
by somebody named Forest of Illusion, man. Wonder who that could have been. That Forest of Illusion guy, he's a real rascal.
The source card is dated October 25th, 1990, which is Forest of Illusion. Localization prototype for Super Mario World was leaked online by somebody
but he named Forest of Illusion. Oh my man. I talked to that Hidden Palace guy, he's pretty good.
The source card is dated October 25th, 1990.
I love that he went through enough trouble to cut this out. Look at that, it's such a nice picture.
Which is 10 months before the US release, and about a month before the...
Notice that he's straight at, like, that's just us. That's our logo. Isn't this guy wonderful?
The game's release in Japan. The prototype looked...
Are you gonna tell me where I can download that file, or like where I can look at it or anything? No?
A slightly earlier copy of the version shown in TV commercials in 1991, since it features the same font and debug functionality, but lacks the Super Mario Bros. 4 subtitle screen which is visible in the commercials. Really, the first big difference comes down to the font. The prototype for some reason had a much thinner font than in the release. The lowercase letters use this thin early font, while the uppercase letters use a variant of the classic thick Atari font. The graphics also...
Okay, there's no way that thick Atari font was anything that he wrote. And of course it's not.
And only really one large difference, which is just that these mailbox signs at Yoshi's house didn't have shading on the sign in the prototype. There's also some other small things that the prototype hadn't finalized up to this point, but I thought I'd cover at least these. The title screen is identical to the Japanese version, except for the translated file select text, which matches the final US version. They also, for some reason, had the unique star graphic for 96 goals in the prototype, but not in the Japanese versions for reasons I could only imagine. Compared to the final version, Nintendo decided to change the shading on the logo at some point. And I didn't realize this until I was editing this part in the video, but the prototype logo has lowercase o's for some reason.
For some reason. I can't keep doing this. I'm gonna run out of space on that canvas.
At least it was fixed.
At least it was fixed. It wasn't a bug, man. They just wanted lowercase letters in there.
Believe it or not, but there's actually even changes to the credits.
Believe it or not!
The Boo Buddies and Big Boo are referred to as Boo Diddley and Boo Jackson, with the names being references to musician Bo Diddley and baseball/football player Bo Jackson.
Football. Wait, hang on. Hang on.
The Boo Buddies in Big Boo are referred to as Boo Diddley and Boo Jackson, with the names being references to musician Bo Diddley and baseball/football player Bo Jackson.
He switched it around. It's football/baseball player, and he made it baseball/football player. Look, guys, it's my own work.
And why it was removed, I have no idea.
Goodbye, Bill. Served us well.
I'm sure someone can explain it in the comments.
It's because Nintendo really doesn't like anything relating to real life, and they treat it as a very legal issue.
Because there has to be a reason.
If you think about it for 10 seconds, maybe it'll come to you, my man.
The prototype's debugging
Excellent
features
timing.
are similar to that of Super Mario 64's, and we'll start with the most basic. Pressing select on the overworld map will let Mario choose a colored Yoshi from yellow, blue, red, and green. Mario also doesn't die when the timer hits 0.
Hey, remember when we went over the beginning of this, and this was actually something that was on the original page with the Game Genie codes? Like, remember that? That was something that we went over. And he's just describing it again here because the page says it. You know, if you were actually considering this, you'd go, the debug features that were disabled in the original are enabled here. So the select to use, you know, different colored Yoshis works. You don't have to explain the entire feature again because we already fucking went over that.
Pausing in a level and pressing select will instantly beat the level and unlock the path, and holding B and pressing select activates the secret exit if it's applicable.
Yeah, right. Padding.
Mario can also walk...
I have AdBlack on, so I'm really wondering, like, how much shit this video would have
without completing any levels. This feature specifically was also shown off in the commercials that I talked about earlier.
Oh, that you talked about.
Holding L and A and then flying with the cape will let you fly instantly for as long as you want. Pressing it again will then let Mario move anywhere, and I mean anywhere. Holding
I mean anywhere.
Y will also speed up your movement. Holding up in a stage and pressing select will cycle through Mario's power-ups, more specifically small, big, cape, and fire.
And see, this would be an interesting point where as much as this guy has been jerking himself off over, it's like Mario 3. Guess what? Mario 3 had a feature like that.
And after watching a castle destruction scene, you can actually replay the scene by pressing L plus R, or pressing up L and R to view the...
L plus R? Why would you say L plus R? Like, that's not just me, right? Nobody actually says, hey, so to do this, you have to push L plus R plus A. You just say you have to hold L, R, and A at the same time, right? That there's a difference between how you would write that out necessarily and how you might say it aloud. Like this would be, you can press L and R to replay the scene because you're... the
scene for the next castles. But what happens if you go to Star Road early?
Oh yeah, notice this actually does mention that these are all in the final, which would probably be good to point out at the beginning of this section, but...
The answer is that it works, but all of the levels are broken entirely. Well, by broken I mean it actually takes you to the test level.
Oh, he just went on to a new section here. I wasn't even listening.
But what happens if you're pressing up, L, and R to view the scene for the next castles? But what happens if you go to Star Road early?
So, where does that come in? Like, he's talking about, oh, you can push these buttons to do different things. You can push this button to go here. You can push this button to skip a scene. Where do you transition from that to, but what happens if you go to Star Road early? Like, that doesn't make any sense. You're just kind of falling onto your face here without the previous shit. If you actually include this, where the article goes, hey, as noted, you can go anywhere, even if you're unlocked or not, that makes sense, but he cut it out.
The answer is that it works, but all of the levels are broken entirely. Well, by broken I mean it actually takes you to the test levels for some reason.
And then, of course, he lies and says something that the article does not say. Oh, it's broken, it doesn't work. And then doubles back and goes, actually, it'll go to a test stage. Like, come the fuck on, man.
And it also takes you to the following levels. Star Road 1 takes you to a duplicative Donut Plains one, so that's cool. Level 2 takes you to a vertical slope test stage. Level 3 takes you to a level where Mario dies instantly. Levels 4 and 5 take you to this test level, which is pretty cool looking if I'm honest. And finally, the special world will take you to the same test stage. But before it does, it plays an intro that has a no Yoshi sign on it. The last thing in the prototype section are these two textures, which contain leftover Japanese text that was eventually overridden by the Super Mario Bros. 4 text, which also didn't get used. Also worth noting here that certain tiles are covered by X tiles, and that these graphics are most likely from The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, as there's a similar file found in the Gigaleak that I looked everywhere for but couldn't find, so just take my word for it. Similar file found in the Gigaleak that I looked everywhere for but couldn't find, so just take my word for it.
The thing with this, as far as I know, hang on. The thing with this is, as far as I know, in the staff chat, somebody mentioned that he kind of turns this into a run-on sentence, right?
So just take my passes are covered by text.
So, in this case, there are certain tiles that are covered out with, or, overwritten by X's.
Which also didn't get used. Also worth noting here that certain tiles are covered by X tiles.
You'll see that's a complete thought in the original wiki article. It is a bullet point. Certain tiles have been covered by X tiles. That is a complete statement. That is the end of it. Certain tiles are covered by X's. Easy. And then Homie decides to not just stop there, but run into the next part, where it mentions, at the end of the graphics are early font graphics left over. Chances are they're not part of this because, they're left over. They're not related to this game at all. They just happen to be there. And no, field trip. It's field trip time. Let's see if we can find these graphics, huh? It's entirely possible I'm not going to see this, but if I do find it, it'll be pretty funny. Yeah, I'm probably not going to find anything in here because it looks pretty gunky. So wait, these are 2-bit tiles, aren't they? They look like it. It looks like something here, maybe. But these are probably compressed, if I had to guess. Yeah, probably. Seems like they'd be compressed. So, okay. I get it. Most likely it would be, found if you decompress stuff, but who knows? I don't care.
And that these graphics are most likely from The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, as there's a similar file found in the Gigaleak that I looked.
One of those things that would be nice to have
this game
an
had
update.
a very interesting development, starting out in 1988 with a very different...
Okay, so now we're on the pre-release page, right? Just gonna cut over to that now?
Overworld and closer connections to Super Mario Bros. 3.
Oh, look, there's actually a little bit of sourcing here that you can almost make out.
Looked everywhere for but couldn't find. This game had a very interesting development, starting out in 1988 with a very different overworld and
He actually sourced a single piece of video footage in here.
closer connections to Super Mario Bros. 3. And fun fact about that, the game was actually built off of a port of Super Mario Bros. 3 that was created to test the Super Famicom's hardware, So it makes a lot of sense now that a lot of the early things derived from Super Mario's actual. This game, just take my word for it. So now we're on to the pre-release stuff. This game had a very interesting development, starting out in 1988 with a very different overworld and closer connections to Super Mario Bros. 3.
You know, this would be a little more interesting if you had rearranged it instead of going in tcrf order, because, like, think about it, we just went over a bunch of shit that was the early Mario 3 era of this game, and now we're rewinding before that and going, did you know? It was interesting that it was built off Mario 3, did you know that? Surprise!
And fun fact about that, the game was actually built off of a port of Super Mario Bros. 3 that was created to test the Super Famicom's hardware, so it makes a lot of sense now that a lot of the early things derived from Super Mario Bros. 3.
That makes a lot of sense now. This dude really didn't, like, bother to actually do anything, did he? Because, like, was he really hyping the whole front half of this video like, wow, this looks a lot like Mario 3, and now he's 53 minutes into this 70-minute video and having the epiphany that, oh, this game was actually based on Mario 3.
At least 2 early builds of Super Mario World were shown on July 28, 1989. The photos were taken off of a projector screen and were published in 1989 issues of Famitsu and Famimanga. It's almost certain that the 1989 Shoshinkai for this game was a private event, open only to members of the press, but what we do have is very nice. Aside from the obvious change in the colors, the logo is pretty much the exact same as the final Japanese version, as is with the wooden border, though the final one is 1 block shorter, and behind the logo is a brown map-style drawing of the Mushroom Island. Also talked about earlier, the overworld is vastly different from the final. On the top side of the border is a small Mario walking, and the lives, stage number, counter, and coin counter is very similar to the previous Mario title. I went over a lot of this pretty extensively earlier, so I won't repeat myself with the details, but this version of the game has 4 worlds, that at least 3 of which have a fortress at the end. The domed mushroom house is clearly a starting point, and interestingly, the prologue cutscene of Super Mario Advance 2 ends with a shot of the original world as it fades over the in-game one, which is a brown map-style drawing of it, not too dissimilar from the very early worlds for Mario World.
This phrase, that whole sentence just felt like he tortured it to change it. He wants to say the same thing, but, like, instead of just going with your own words and being like, the Game Boy Advance port starts with an in-game cutscene that uses the actual in-game overworld graphics, but then transitions into a more hand-drawn map style, vaguely resembling the way that the Mushroom overworld looked in the earliest parts of Mario World. He has to take what was already written and twist and transform it into something else because he's not capable of writing his own fucking words.
The backgrounds of the outdoor levels are also similar to the ones used in the finished version, with the only exception being the circular donut clouds. We can only assume things about it, but judging by their position in between shots, they were probably there as a separate background layer that scrolled by itself in the background. The HUD is also very similar, but for some reason the only thing that's missing is the bonus star counter. The other differences are things like how the lives counter isn't centered with the Mario text, the coin counter is in the place of where the bonus star counter is, and the reserve box color is also teal in only some of the screenshots. These early screenshots also feature many of the things I talked about earlier, like the original coins, as well as those early mushroom platforms. The Super Leaf from Mario 3 also makes an appearance in these, as does Raccoon Mario. The rest of the differences here I've already talked about earlier, and you can probably tell just by looking at the image. This one seems to be an early version of the level Mondo, and aside from Mario 3 textures, the Koopa is walking underwater, the larger floating platform is unused, and the sprite buoyancy was implemented by this point, but I guess it just didn't feel like working or something. Buoyancy was implemented by this point, but I guess it just didn't feel like working or something. Buoyancy was implemented by this point, but I guess it just didn't feel like working or something.
That's another case of him transforming language in a way that he's not, like, respecting the actual intent. Notice that, in this case, the floating platform is unused in the final game, but only acts like the smaller ones if Sprite buoyancy is enabled, which is basically saying the big platform only really acts like the smaller ones if you turn on buoyancy so that it floats on the water. If you don't turn it on, it just stays in place. And Bonehead here completely fucks it and says something entirely different.
Water. The larger floating platform is unused, and the Sprite buoyancy was implemented by this point, but I guess it just didn't feel like working or something.
He's just completely full of shit and doesn't understand what he's talking about, so he tries to change the words and comes to a completely different conclusion. Sprite buoyancy was clearly in here, it just didn't feel like working. What does that mean? What does any of that mean?
Honestly, the rest of...
What's really funny is the actual article text here mentions that it uses what appears to be one of the unused level modes that was talked about in the main article at the very start, and if you remember, was the first fucking thing Bozo here talked about. He doesn't mention it.
The level screenshots all have pretty obvious changes in texture and general layout, and while I think that they're all pretty cool, there's honestly nothing else here that I haven't really already shown yet, so really for the sake of moving on to the next segment, I'll just show all of them in quick succession.
Okay, here, I'll do that too.
The 82nd issue of Famitsu on September 1st, 1989 also has some scans of the game, but most of it's just everything I've already shown, but I thought I would show it anyway because why not?
Wait, hang on.
The 82nd issue of Famitsu...
The 82nd issue of that, huh?
on September 1st, 1989 also has some scans of the game, but most of it's just everything I've already shown, but I thought I would show it anyway because why not?
I showed it already, but I thought I'd show it again because why not, right?
Shot from an interview with some developers from September 2017 features an early design for Yoshi, which also included some other enemies too. The original sprite sheet for this was...
Remember when he didn't know the name of these things? He was like, what are those?
Was also found 3 years later in the Giga Leak, with this being the file name. And like with almost all Nintendo games, there is, of course, early footage. This was also found 3 years later in the Giga Leak, with this being the file name.
Wait, what's the file name? What's the file name? What's the file name?
And was also found 3 years later in the Giga Leak, with this being the file name. And like with almost all Nintendo...
He doesn't mention it! Here's the file name, what is it, man? I don't know.
...in the Giga Leak, with this being the file name. And like with almost all
this
Nintendo
fucking clown,
games,
man.
there is, of course, early footage of this game from Space World of 1990. The two builds that we have are a video of a near-final playable demo, and it actually shows quite a lot, which includes a different title screen, Donut Plains 1, Yoshi's House, the Ghost House, and a couple of other stages. The beta footage is actually really helpful for showing even more older versions of the map, starting with the map in full. Really the only things I notice are that the edges for the islands are different, there's less grass, and that it honestly looks like some kind of creepypasta. Starting with the map in full. Really the only things I notice are that the edges for the islands are different, there's less grass, and that it honestly looks like some kind of creepypasta. Even earlier versions look more like drawings than they do a game, and this one follows the same tropes as the first image.
Like, you realize it probably looks at least partially like that because it's a printed reproduction of a screenshot and not the actual game. Like, some of the details probably going to get lost because the resolution is shitty and blurry and everything is kind of fuzzy. But yeah, sure, just keep talking out of your ass, man, why not?
Nintendo did eventually add things like the sign next to the castle, but other than that, time to move on to levels again. The early version of Yoshi's Island 1 is almost surreal to me. With the sky being yellow, the bullet bill not having a mouth, and the general graininess of the image, it almost looks like more of a ROM than it does an actual image of the game.
What?
Again. The early version of Yoshi's Island 1 is almost surreal to me. With the sky being yellow, the bullet bill not having a mouth, and the general graininess of the image, it almost looks like more of a ROM than it does an actual image of the game.
More of a ROM? What? What are you saying?
This image is from a little later in development, but is much more clear and less grainy. HUD changes aside, I can't get over how the bullet bill looks. I just can't. Like, just look at it, I love it. This version is nearly complete, and now the differences are getting minuscule. I'll let you see if you can figure it out. I'll wait. Okay, well, if you haven't found it by now, for some reason the trail of cloud blocks was eventually moved over by one.
There's another for some reason. For Somerson.
One block to the right. Because the devs felt like it, I
Oh,
guess.
there's another because the devs.
Yes. Can you guess the change in this one? Well, that Galumba was originally in Yoshi's Island 2, and now he's not. Okay, this one is actually pretty cool. This image shows a random underground area, which I'm guessing is an early version of Yoshi's Island 2, and obviously the random underground area, which I'm guessing is an early version of Yoshi's Island 2, and obviously the shell is where the grab blocks are now. But look at the top of the pre-release one. I don't know what that is, but it's pretty cool looking.
Okay, so I'm going to take a quick guess and say what's at the top here is probably some fucking logo. In fact, it looks like it's the bottom of what says Mario World. WORLD. It's just the fucking title screen, you nincompoop. They put the title logo on top of the screenshot. That's all it is.
Whatever that black stuff is in the Yoshi's Island 3 one is cool too.
My dude, it's probably the other part of the title screen because it looks the exact fucking same.
And I have no idea what it is. So if anybody knows why that's like that, let me know.
Oh, darn.
Super Mario World.
That's too bad. I was gonna leave a comment. Hang on. I know how to fix this.
Super Mario World. No. Yoshi's Island 4 also has a couple of changes. The empty block trail is 4 tiles lower to the ground, the coin trail is 1 tile further away from the mushroom platform, and there wasn't even a pipe yet. Just like in the beta footage from 1990, Donut Plains 1 uses a different background palette, and in this one specifically, Mario's cape is also different. The early version of Chocolate Island 2 used far more regular palettes for the foreground and background rather than the
Far more regular palettes. What?
The early version of Chocolate Island 2 used far more regular palettes for the foreground and background rather than the brown mountain tiles used in the final, and the Dino Rhinos and Dino Torches are also different, with the pre-release version being a different angle of the sprite. There's also this early version of the sunken ghost ship, and it's pretty much the exact same except for the wooden box on the right being shorter in the final. The last section for the pre-release version are 6 different versions of the title screen. There's nothing that I haven't shown already on the title screens, but my personal favorite one is the Giga League version with the Mario 4 logo, just because I've never seen a version that says that until I started making this video. Also, the actual sprite for the Mario 4 logo can be found in the graphics data of the game's non-Japanese releases only. The last and final thing in the pre-release is the change in the font that I had briefly mentioned earlier in the video. Many of the letters are completely different, and since I did already show this earlier, it's finally time to move on to the final game's unused content.
I mean, he already went through a bunch of stuff in the final game's content. That's what the start of the video was. You imbecile. You maroon. You absolute fucking Pringle.
Well, we've finally made it to the final version of the game. Since I did already show this earlier, it's finally time to move on to the final game's unused content. Well, we've finally made it to the final version of the game.
This is so bizarre to me, because this is one video, man. Like, why are you saying, well, it's finally time to reach the final game, and then, well, we finally made it to the final part? Like, it's one part of the video, man. Just say, alright, on to the final section of the video where we go over unused content in the game that I already went over at the beginning. Not that hard.
This section will go over everything that still exists in the game files. And to start, let's go
Game files. My man, this game does not have files.
over the sprite-based things. The sprite IDs 1A, 5E, 7E, and 7F contain sprites for the classic piranha plant, this platform, a flying
This platform.
red coin, and a flying mushroom. The classic piranha's vine tile got replaced in the memory with a frame of the Cheep Cheeps, and for some reason the enemy is red instead of yellow like it usually is. The floating platform is a platform, and the two flying
Note that this would also be a chance to tie it into the earlier content that we were going over with, you know, the floating platform, and oh, Sprite buoyancy wasn't working today, derp. But nope. No continuity, no nothing. I assume that this video was actually recorded, like, chunks separately, and that's why it feels so fucking weird. And he just glued it together because who cares, it's content. Just recycle it.
items are just simply unused like with the rest. Also, in case you were wondering, the red coin gives 5 coins, so there's that. Sprite ID 88 lets you put this weird looking flying cage in the game, and Mario gets automatically placed inside of the cage when the level starts. And if used in conjunction with an auto-scroller, the cage will move across the level on a set path. I'll show you the fixed version of the cage later on. The Sprite ID E4 spawns a bunch of bats at whatever Y position it's placed, which acts a lot like the boost spawner in the ghost houses. You also for some reason can't kill the bats at all.
For some reason.
If you try to jump on them, it ends up damaging you. Another weird thing about this one is that the bats spawned by the object have a completely different palette than the ones in-game, being blue and red instead of the normal green and orange. Object IDs 16, 17, 10, 37, and 38 contain a blue coin, a rope, a magenta block, a small door, and a question mark block with a shell. The blue coin acts just like a normal coin, but it's blue! And I know I said this earlier, but the first Mario game to have blue coins that you collect was Super Mario 64. The other things are honestly not that crazy, but I thought I'd include with Super Mario 64. The other things are honestly not that crazy, but I thought I'd include it anyway because why not? The last objects I'll talk about are objects 3F, 36, 37, and 3E. The first one is bush number 5 in the object set for the bushes, which is just not used. The conveyor ropes are completely functional and use special animated rope tiles. They can go left or right, and the diagonal ones can face either direction. Why these are unused I don't know, and I'm also not sure why the log objects aren't used either. Alright, on to sprites. So for the sprites we'll start with this Lakitu. And aside from the variant enemies of him that you do see in the game, this one was probably meant to appear in levels that had them, but just didn't. Remember this cage? Well, this is what it looks like when the texture is fixed. So it turns out that the bird
That is not what the texture looks like when it's fixed. I'm pretty sure this was a mock-up made by Rachel. Rachel made this graphic. This is a mock-up of what it kinda might look like. It even says if you hover over it, something like this. This isn't clearly marked as a mock-up, which is probably just due to this page, like, you know, rotting over time. People don't update stuff, and it probably was noted at one point, but like even just something like, the cage might look like this, and here's what it might look like if we glue this bird onto it. All the graphics here are, you know, weird. But it didn't, and this guy turned it into a fact. That's what it looks like now. This is the cage. The cage just looks like this.
This one was probably meant to appear in levels that had them, but just didn't. Remember this cage? Well, this is what it looks like when the texture is fixed. So it turns out that the bird enemy called the Blue Jay was apparently going to carry the cage object around, and it would also follow Mario around on the Overworld map when reactivated by changing this address in the code.
No, this is almost certainly not going to work anymore because you have to use a very specific format of save state. This should probably be changed to a pro action replay code. You know, just like a regular RAM poke. This is the wiki showing its age. This article is a little long in the teeth. So, you know, credit where it's due, this guy's at least pointing out places we can fix things.
These next two things were meant to go in the Overworld.
The only way you could fix this video is putting it in the garbage, though.
Overworld map, but either never did or were scrapped at some point in the development. The piranha plant was meant to be decoration, but the Koopaling, though, that had a much different purpose.
Please tell me that you're going to snipe this person's video.
The Koopalings
Sure looks like it, don't it?
are actually present on the Overworld map.
Look, it's even zoomed in to cut off the top and bottom where the text would be.
Possible to show up in the game. This is the only Overworld sprite to have a purpose other than decoration, and it was originally meant to drag you into levels by doing this whenever you crossed paths.
Like, okay, bucko. This guy says, oh, I didn't know it was this big of a problem. I didn't think it was that bad. You can't fucking tell me that you didn't intentionally crop this shit out to cut off the information from the other video.
But the Koopaling, though, that had a much different purpose. The Koop...
Yeah, he zoomed in just enough to make it so that you can't see the actual text on it. He knew exactly what the fuck he was doing. You know, just in case you didn't realize. Oh yeah, new video coming soon. New comment too. This is what I mean when I say, like, I started watching this video and got kind of sick of it because it quite frankly sucks. Every bit about this video is just fucking awful, but there's parts of this where he absolutely 100% knew what he was doing. There is no excuse for this. This video seems really fucking zoomed in and it's kind of weird, and then you realize it's zoomed in because that way he can cut off the actual text from the original video. This guy has fucking damning proof in his own videos that he's nothing but a fucking thief and a leech and a piece of shit. I hate these people. Somebody actually had to go through the trouble of making this ROM hack and putting in the unused Koopaling onto it, getting it to work properly, and then recording a video. And homie here took it, downloaded it, zoomed it in enough that you can't see the original creator's text, didn't link anything, didn't even bother to put this video was originally uploaded by some other guy, and just...
Koopalings are actually present on the Overworld map, but are never visible due to a path change that made them impossible to
Not even credit to the author.
This is the only
I made
Overworld
this.
sprite to have a purpose other than decoration, and it was originally meant to drag you into levels by doing this whenever you crossed paths with their tiles. So the rest of the graphics are generally uncategorized, and we're going to start with...
Generally uncategorized. By who? Like, There's so many times that this guy tries to hide the fact that he's reading from a wiki page with how he slightly twists words, how he edits out text from things, how he like squeezes things in to make things, you know, unclear that it's somebody else. And yeah, that's another thing Tappet Snake just said. While we're here, here's another one of his fucking video posts. Look, it's him. He's making a video. Be on the lookout for it. I'm pretty sure this is Mario 1 because you can see the same stupid cat he put in it. Here's something for all you people at home who might not have seen this before. You see that there? YT5S.com. It's a YouTube downloader. You paste a YouTube video in here and it downloads it for you. All of these stolen videos that this dude downloaded and pasted into his own shit. Every single one of these. Somebody else's work. If you're lucky, he put your username in the description. The other stuff? Yeah, he just stole a bunch of long plays. Oh, it absolutely was. If you go back to the video and scroll down, Long Play Archive, World of Long Plays, every single thing he fucking just stole. Not a single frame of this video that wasn't him doing a screen capture scrolling the wiki is original. It's all stolen. He already said he has no way to play this game. He couldn't be bothered to fucking figure that out.
These three things. The first thing is an old version of the P-switch, the second is an animated star tile meant for the ghost house, and the third is an early version of the Yoshi berry. These ones are definitely interesting. The one of Mario flying without the cape is very weird looking, and it reminds me of the meme of that guy flying. The dino ones are interesting too, and the dino rhino was supposed to have an actual attack. The one that's in game just walks around back and forth, but this one was actually going to open his mouth and try to attack the player. Also, the fireball right beside it is unfortunately not related to the sprite, as it's just in the same tile set for some reason.
What? Run that by me again?
Open his mouth and try to attack the player.
Okay, so he does open his mouth and attack. That's what this GIF is showing.
Also, the fireball right beside it is unfortunately not related to the sprite, as it's just in the same tile set for some reason.
Where did that come from?
The other guy, which is...
He just made that up out of whole cloth. Like, the text says that it's a vertical version of Yoshi's Fireball, which makes sense, because if you assume that this guy was going to, like, tilt his head up and barf a fireball, that's probably what it would look like. That's why it's here. And Homie seems to have interpreted it as, it's part of Yoshi's thing, but it's just here for some reason, I guess. It was in the same tile set for some reason, who knows? Like, it's just unused, it doesn't do anything. Like, what the fuck, man?
Is one of the transformed kings from the Mario 3 from Super Mario All-Stars, uses a scaled-down, differently colored variant with a crown.
You could also maybe, I don't know, show the Mario 3 one, maybe? Like, for us it doesn't matter, because if you're on our wiki you probably have a good idea what it looks like, and you can always go there, but, you know, it'd probably be good here, but this guy, like, you're making a video, you have the chance, you're going all over all of this shit right now. This is the perfect time to do this. But he doesn't care.
This dust was supposed to appear whenever Mario got on a Yoshi, but I guess they thought it was messy since they made it go unused. However, it is possible to re-enable it by using this code with the Game Genie.
It's a good thing that he's never going to show that, because that's just too hard.
Placeholder graphics for the on, off, and spinning blocks are loaded before the animated versions are in the game. The Japanese in the before texture means block transfer, and I'm not really sure why they load it in anyway, but to each his own, I guess. The other thing is obviously early graphics for the bricks. The old one is kind of poorly shaded compared to the finished one, but I could still see applications for both. The birds that are found on Yoshi's house have 2 unused flying frames. These are still unused in Mario World, but interestingly they ended up being repurposed in the Game Boy Advance remake during this cutscene. And for the last...
What cutscene is it? Could you say? Could you say what cutscene it is, or are you just going to say it's a cutscene in the Game Boy Advance version? It's not important. Also, I'm really, really loving the constant application of random fucking ROM hack videos in the background. This isn't Super Mario World. It's a ROM hack version of it. But, like, these tiles are certainly not used. They're mock-ups for when you want instant death blocks.
2 unused graphics, we have a texture for a 5-up bonus that I talked about way earlier in the video. And the last thing is... and. It's just and. Alright, so all we have left now are the unused levels. I very briefly mentioned a couple of them already, but there's around 10 more of them that I think are worth mentioning before we finally finish. The first series of levels are the intros to the levels themselves. There's 3 unused level intros in the game, and all of them feature the No Yoshi sign from earlier. All 3 of the intros are also the exact same, except for the backgrounds. The first actual level, though, is referred to as Morton's Plains, and it references the same level data of Donut Plains 1, but it has a glitched background with the level names being blank in the Japanese version.
Like, notice how that makes no sense. He turned another sentence into a runoff there.
But it has a glitched background with the level names being...
It has a glitched background with the level names being broken. Like, those are 2 different thoughts, my man. The background is broken, and in the Japanese version, the level name is blank instead of saying Morton's Plains.
Blank in the Japanese version. The background tile map is the same one seen in several other stages, but this one has the wrong graphics and palette applied. The test level has many different level IDs, and they all consist of this level that has the words test on it. The last known use of this level seems to have been to test the secret 1-up points, which is what those numbered mushrooms are, to make sure...
Remember when we went over those earlier in the video? Did you forget?
Sure that they work when you get them in the respective order. The vertical slope test was mentioned earlier in the video in palette form, but this is what the actual level looks like. It's just a vertical level that contains 8 slope objects, and the slopes are specifically designed to work with the memory maps that are used in vertical levels. It's also possible to fix the broken background by changing the tile set to Underground 3. This level, being called Ride Among the Clouds, is the
Somebody pointed out that this is a fan name, it's not actually given a real name. A lot of these level names are kind of made up by fans. And that's fine. I gave the example in the tcrf staff channel that, like, if I say the liminal waterfall level of Mario 3 that's not used, you probably have a good idea of what I'm talking about. If I say unused level 7, what the fuck is that? I don't know what number that is. So it's the same deal here. But this guy talks as if it's an authoritative name.
First level in the ROM aside from the test level, which makes this one of the earliest levels ever created for the game. It's obviously notable for being an early level, but it's also the only level that uses this floating platform in the entire game, so that's...
Wait a second. I just realized this dude couldn't get actual footage, so he fucking scrolls the level while having a cutout paste of it. I'm gonna fucking choke, guys. I'm dying here. Look, guys, I'm a YouTube content creator. Oh my god, man. I'm dying. I'm dying, Squirtle.
That's cool. Also, the pipe at the end unfortunately doesn't go anywhere. This level, called Mushroom Scales, is so far the only level I know of that actually uses the classic piranha plants.
The only level you know of, huh? That's funny.
The level sprites also indicate that the platforms might have been intentionally programmed to move around, but there's honestly no telling since this is the only information that we have.
Wait, what?
Piranha plants. The level sprites also indicate that the platforms might have been intentionally programmed to move around, but there's honestly no telling since this is the only information that
Alright, so what Fucko here did is, normally the mushroom platforms in Super Mario World come in pairs. You spawn one, it spawns its friend, you know, a few tiles away. That's why when you look here, you see this one, which spawned its friend, this guy. And then, based on, I'm pretty sure, like either the X or Y position, it's either right next to or spread out twice as far. The thing that this level does is it acts as if these only spawn one platform, so you put one on both. And then, like, maybe they'd automatically link up that way or something. It's just not how that works. But Homie here has twisted that into being, oh, they were supposed to move around or something, because he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything about how this works or what it's doing. He's just full of shit.
we have. Now, at first glance, you might think this is probably a level that teleports you to level stages, but it's actually meant to teleport to the bosses. The level is called the Boss Test, and the doors specifically lead to Bowser, Morton, Roy, Ludwig, Iggy, Larry, Reznor, Lemmy, and Wendy. It's speculated that the ordering might have been the order that the bosses were programmed in, but again, there's no telling. And for the people who really want to know, the two question blocks contain a cape feather and a fire flower.
For the people who really want to know, dude, they're watching your video. You already have an audience. They're already watching. You can just fucking tell them.
This one is one of my favorites. It's called the Lava Cave, and it's as complete as Right Among the Clouds is, but it's still missing some things like a goal sub-level for the alt path. This level also uses Lava Object 1A, when the final game uses Object 3A for underground levels, and it's because the sloped lava tiles would overwrite the generic lava tiles before they changed them.
See, this would be a case where Homie could zoom in and show that lunar magic quite frankly shows the broken, glitched lava tiles. He just doesn't. Presumably, that's actually a good question. Did he just invent more? Because, like, I don't know if that pipe can be entered. The wiki doesn't seem to claim anything about it. It mentions there's no goal sub-level, but that's for the pipe at the end where you'd come out somewhere to, you know, clear the level.
Small test levels appropriately named twin blocks.
Appropriately named. It's not named, that's just what we call it, dude.
And the blocks have 2 hotheads and 2 sparkies. There's not much more to this one. It was definitely used to make sure they follow the walls. The image on the top is an early version of Wendy's castle.
Here's a fun one, because you know who made that image at the bottom?
This is the only version of a level found in the final game.
Do you know who made this image that he's showing off right now? I made that. I actually remember making this because what I did was at one point I exported both levels out of Lunar Magic, and actually let me see if I zoom in here. What I did was I took both images and made them grayscale, and then for one of them I removed one color channel, and then for the other one I removed the next one, and then just blended them together. So one of them, like, if you combine them both, they show up as white, but if you remove one, you only get, you know, one set of colors. And that way it created this kind of, like, diff visually that you could see. That's why like the lunar magic stuff is still in here. That's how I made that. This guy, he made it by doing this. I made that. So I guess you could say on some level, this is almost personal. We're getting close to the end though, so that means I need to pull up the good music. This isn't the good music, but I like it anyway.
And it's almost identical to the finished one, but there are some things that they changed. The original was more difficult due to the changes, but the weirdest thing is that in the older version, the door at the end just doesn't exist. They probably just didn't add it yet.
Yeah, probably.
I really don't need to show this one because it's easily the most boring, but I'll show it anyway since we're almost done. This level is nothing more than just 8 screens of nothing with a pipe, and if you had to guess what this was called, what do you think?
I don't know. What would you call it if it's a pipe in ground?
Well, if you guessed pipe in ground, then congratulations.
Good job. You did it.
The last 2 things are for the Ghost House exit and its cloudy version. And like with the other Ghost House exits, this one is probably meant to use an empty layer 2 as its background, but it just doesn't. The specified data here only contains a goal bar, and it might have belonged to the next Ghost House exit, or maybe a completely different level. Also, the cloudy version has, well, clouds, and 3 bushes on layer 2. And that is all of the unused content. Well, we've made it to the
Well, except for the stuff you left out intentionally.
When I started writing the script for this video, I thought it would contain far less stuff, but I was wrong. For this video, well, we've made it to the end. So when I originally started writing the script for this video, I thought it would contain far less stuff, but I was wrong.
The funny thing is like, you can see how much stuff is in this game by just clicking on tcrf links. There's a really, really handy thing that tells you roughly how long a page is, and it's really pretty ingenious. Like, say, you go to this page that has a lot of sprites on it, and the scroll bar tells you how much stuff is on this page. Look at all this stuff. That's a lot of stuff. And you can find that by clicking 2 things on the article page. It's really not that hard. To be surprised by the amount of shit in this game is to show that, frankly, you have no fucking clue what you're talking about, and you shouldn't be making a video like this. Anyway, carry on.
I hope you guys enjoyed this one because I spent pretty much
I loved
2 months on it. And of the one other video I've made on unused content so far, this is a really good addition to the series. Of the one other video I've made on unused content so far, this is a really good addition to the series. If you guys have any other games that you think I should do a deep dive on, I'd love to hear your suggestions in the comments, because I have a lot of fun making these videos, and I might expand my content even more in the future, but I have a lot on my plate right now, so we'll see. Alright, well, I gotta go. Binding of Isaac multiplayer will hopefully be out by the time I upload this, and so I'll be pretty busy with that, so... And as always, guys, I hope you learned something new, and as always, thanks for watching.
So what'd you think? Good video?